Chapter 94, 94 Attack. 94 Attack. Lumien's eyes were narrowed, his body tensing as he sensed the pores on his skin open. An overwhelming premonition of danger washed over him. In the dream ruins, he'd had no shortage of similar experiences. Instantly, he halted and tumbled to the side, like a boneless sack of flesh. A whistling wind filled his ears as a razor-sharp axe grazed his body, slicing through the air. Lumien hit the ground with a thud, attempting to roll to his feet. But pale white and pitch black, eerie arms extended from the surrounding shadows, grabbing his clothes and coiling around his body. The cold sensation and stiffness seeped into Lumien's flesh. Twisting wildly, trying to escape the restraints with his powerful agility, he shouted, "Help!" Two malicious, bumpy palms smothered his mouth, stifling his voice abruptly, leaving only a whimper. Simultaneously, Lumien glimpsed an elongated humanoid shadow on the wall, raising the axe at him. Clang! A two-handed broadsword of pure light blocked the axe's slash. Ryan was the first to rush over, not bothering with his dawn armor, and simply summoned a sword of dawn. The shadowy axe took on a heavy, sharp, and dark appearance the moment it detached from the wall. The second person to arrive at the washroom door was Leah, who had been in the opposite study. The silver bells on her veil and boots tinkled softly. Leah raised her right palm and aimed her silver revolver at the strange arms grabbing Lumien. They tightened, as if trying to drag Lumien into the shadows. Blue blood vessels bulged from Lumien's neck, forehead, and hands, straining with all his might. Yet, he couldn't fend off the pale white and pitch black arms. His body dissolved into the shadows piece by piece. Bang! Leah fired, and a golden bullet wrapped in blazing flame struck a pitch-black arm that seemed to drip ink. The arm ignited, quickly releasing Lumien's neck and retreating into the shadowy corner. Aurora arrived at the washroom to find such a scene. Seeing a third of her brother's body thinned and darkened into a shadow, his expression growing increasingly rigid, Aurora wasted no time. She pulled iron-black materials from her hidden pocket and sprinkled the powder at Lumien, her light blue eyes darkening. Lumien felt an invisible hand grasp him and pull him toward Aurora. He recalled his sister using a similar spell before, but it had pushed him away. This time, she yanked him closer. The colossal hand's strength equaled that of the sinister arms, stopping Lumien's slide into the shadows. Clang! 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 Ryan drove the figure with the sharp axe back into the wall. The next second, Valentine appeared behind Leah and Aurora. Witnessing Lumien's state, he spread his arms wide. Golden illusory flames materialized around Lumien, incinerating countless wicked arms. The pitch-black or pale white arms either melted like candles or evaporated into black wisps of smoke. Within seconds, 4/5 of the strange arms grabbing Lumien vanished. The remaining arms struggled to resist the invisible hand and Lumien's efforts, releasing him one after another. Feeling the grip on him loosen, Lumien was pulled by the invisible hand, half flying and half pouncing toward Aurora. As the pitch-black and pale white arms retracted, the axe-wielding figure froze on the wall, merging with the surrounding shadows, leaving no trace. Lumien stood and surveyed the area, sneering. "Is that it? Aren't you looking down on us by only sending one person?" Aurora glared at him. "Don't speak." How could he utter such ill-omened words at a time like this? As Aurora's voice echoed in the corridor, a black, spiked vine, abnormally thick as if from the abyss, descended from the study's ceiling. At its top bloomed a massive, blood-red flower with a foul odor. The flower expanded, as if stretching its mouth to the limit. It suddenly engulfed Leah's head and writhed frantically. As it chewed, the object in its mouth turned into a thin piece of paper and was shredded. Immediately after, the radiant broadsword of light flew from the washroom, impaling the massive evil flower to the wall. Streams of bright red blood oozed from the sword, evaporating into mist. Simultaneously, tendrils of black vines cascaded from the ceiling of the Lumien residence, enveloping the walls and sealing the windows with enormous red blossoms. Aurora swiftly produced a pearl-like powder and tossed it into the air, mingling it with summoned natural forces. An unseen warm breeze blew, causing the black vines to wither and lose their vigor, no longer able to support the vivid red flowers suspended in midair. The wilted vines dangled lifelessly from the second floor. Not a bad result. Aurora mused to herself. She had obtained the spell from a member of the curly-haired baboons' research society. Intended as a gardening spell for weeding, Aurora had acquired it at a bargain price, thinking it would be useful someday. Typically, it was used to clear weeds from building walls, but today it proved invaluable. Nonetheless, the abyssal black vines were unnaturally resilient. They merely withered and didn't perish instantly. This bought time for Valentine, who summoned the golden and illusory fire of light to incinerate the vile creatures in the corridor and rooms. Ryan then flooded the area with the pure sunrise gleam, banishing all evil and obliterating all illusions. Confronted with this situation he was powerless in, Hunter Lumion stifled his urge to perform the enigmatic dance. He observed his sister and the three outsiders collaborate to eradicate the anomaly that had invaded the second floor. Soon, the black vines and red flowers disintegrated into smoke. But Leah's veil and the silver bells on her boots continued to jingle, signaling that danger still lurked. Lumion swiftly surveyed the scene and sniffed. The air doesn't smell right. A faint, sweet scent lingered. I feel a little dizzy and want to sleep, Leah confessed her unease. The fumes from the burning vines and flowers contain an anesthetic. How sinister. Aurora, possessing extensive mysticism knowledge, acted promptly. She produced a handful of transparent powder and scattered it forward. A fierce wind materialized from nowhere, gusting through every corner of the second floor. Ryan, Lumion, Valentine, and Leah dashed into separate rooms, throwing open the windows that had been sealed by the black vines. As the innocuous wind subsided, Aurora turned to Lumion and inquired, "And now?" Lumion sniffed cautiously. "Don't smell it anymore." "I feel better, too," Leah chimed in. At that moment, the silver bells on her veil and boots ceased their movement. The crisis was averted. A probing attack from the Padre and company, Aurora speculated. Lumion glanced at Valentine, who appeared troubled. Could be Guillaume Benet, who just received a boon, or the already powerful shepherd Pierre Barry. Valentine's expression softened at Lumion's choice of words. Ryan surveyed the area and declared in a deep voice, "Whichever the case, we must heighten our vigilance. From now on, let's split into 2 groups for shifts. We'll alternate between resting and standing guard, day or night. A single guard risked being ambushed without timely assistance." "No problem." Aurora and Lumion exchanged glances before adding, "I'll be in the same group as my brother." Ryan and the others didn't object. Over the next few days, the 2 groups maintained a watchful eye in 6-hour rotations. Although nothing transpired, as Lent drew near, they all felt the impending danger, anticipating relentless waves of peril. During this period, Lumion continued exploring the dream while resting. He didn't immediately hunt the flaming monster. Instead, he suppressed his impatience and sought to understand the creature's patterns. With his invisibility, long-range tracking, daily observation, and ample patience, Lumion finally gleaned the information he desired. The flaming monster would set traps in the dream clearing each morning, practicing techniques it had mastered for 45 to 90 minutes. It would then follow a fixed route into a flesh-strewn area to replenish its energy. Its afternoon activities were unpredictable, mainly patrolling its territory via different paths. Lumion had yet to discern its criteria for choosing routes. In the evening, it would retrace the fixed route and re-enter the hunting zone. Lumion remained ignorant of its nocturnal activities. He had only spent a maximum of 6 hours in the dream ruins and never ventured there at night. The night before Lent, Lumion jolted awake in the hazy gray fog of the dreamscape bedroom. He glanced at fallen Mercury beside him and his mind snapped into sharp focus. This was the night he would hunt down the flaming monster. Chapter 95, 95 and Out in the Open, Ambush. 95 and Out in the Open, Ambush. Lumion meticulously wrapped his left hand in layers of white bandages. He gathered his supplies, fallen Mercury, his iron-black axe, gray-amber perfume, biscuits, cheese, bloodied mutton chops, rope for traps, and a bag of cooled boiled water. Slipping his shotgun over his shoulder, he left his semi-subterranean dwelling. Through the thin gray fog, he ventured into a barren wasteland, riddled with cracks. He entered the dreamlike ruins and strode toward the clearing where the flaming monster often lurked. Hearing a distant noise, Lumion veered towards a path he anticipated the creature would take, arriving at a natural trap he'd discovered earlier. A deep pit lay beside the road, with collapsed walls to the front and left. Stacked rocks bordered the right side, and behind it, a mostly collapsed house loomed. Such a trap was difficult to spot. Lumien had found it only after scouring the area multiple times. He crouched behind the pit, tossing in a few sharpened wooden stakes. He covered it with a rope net he'd woven earlier and camouflaged it with soil. With the simple trap set, he placed his bait, 2 blood-soaked lamb chops, half on solid ground and half suspended above the pit. Lumien stepped back, assessing the precarious balance. He retreated into the mostly collapsed house, perching himself on the remains of an outer wall. He adjusted his position to watch the trap without being seen by passing monsters. Next, he took out the gray amber perfume and sprayed it on the wall. A delicate, sweet scent wafted through the air, carried by sporadic gusts of wind that blew through the ruins. The fragrance clung to the wall and to Lumien. Without hesitation, he leaped away, looping back to the path where the flaming monster would appear, positioning himself closer to its hunting grounds. Once more, he changed direction, crossing the path and entering the ruins of a building opposite. Reaching the rear of the crumbling structure, he stopped, leaned against the wall, and waited. As with his strategy against the shotgun monster, Lumien never expected his trap to fool the flaming monster or wound it severely. These decoys and alarms targeted the creature's keen senses, observation, and behavior. Only a hunter knew how to exploit a hunter's strengths. Of course, all this relied on the target operating primarily on instinct, its intelligence limited to combat. Leaning against the wall, Lumien gripped fallen Mercury in his bandaged left hand, tearing off the pitch-black cloth shrouding its surface. He couldn't know how long it would take for the flaming monster to arrive, all he could do was be patient. Patience was his strong suit, a remnant from his vagrant days. Time crawled by. Unseen by Lumien, a charred, flame-tinged monster entered the path. After walking over 20 meters, its nose twitched. It detected the faint scent of blood. The monster didn't immediately turn. As it continued, it surreptitiously scanned the source of the smell. Passing the collapsed wall, the bloody lamb chops caught its eye. Tempting food, but the flaming monster resisted its instincts, not devouring the bait. It pressed on, slowing its pace. Soon, an unusual fragrance filled its nostrils. It instantly deduced the meat was a trap and a hunter lay in ambush nearby. This hunter seemed different from the one who had previously observed it while invisible. It lacked sufficient knowledge of hunters and hadn't masked its scent beforehand. Taking a few more steps, the flaming monster used the fragrance and subtle footprints to pinpoint the enemy hiding on the outer wall of the building behind the trap. Feigning ignorance, it increased its distance by another 7 to 8 meters. Suddenly, it whirled around, its scarlet flames rapidly condensing into a fireball tinged with white. Boom. With a flick of its right palm, the fireball hurtled towards Lumien's ambush location, collapsing the outer wall and causing the house to shudder. Hearing the explosion from a distance, Lumien abandoned his hiding spot, darting into the clearing, his movements a wild, distorted dance. The explosion was like a signal flare, a stark reminder for him to swiftly ready the second phase of the trap. Lumien and Aurora had devised this intricate plan, luring their prey into sending out their own signal flares. In the midst of his mesmerizing dance, Lumien detected the hazy forms of the mouth orifice monster, the shotgun monster, and the skinless monster. By then, the flaming monster had already approached the collapsed wall, searching for any trace of its enemy. Lumien danced for another 10 to 20 seconds, his movements growing more intense. He drew out the ritual silver dagger with his right hand, making a small incision on his left wrist. A single drop of blood emerged, congealing into a tiny sphere. Lumien stepped forward, pivoted, and snatched up the blood droplet, aiming it at the mouth orifice monster. "I." He uttered the word in ancient Hermes, his voice barely above a whisper. At that moment, the flaming monster had discovered the faint footprints Lumien had left behind. Catching a whiff of a subtle scent, it started tracking him. Quickly shouting his follow-up command, Lumien watched as the mouth orifice monster swallowed the blood droplet from the tip of the silver dagger and entered his body. A wave of madness, bloodlust, cruel intent, and ravenous hunger washed over him. Lumien fought back the discomfort, hastily bandaging his insignificant wound with a white strip he'd brought along. Next, he popped a piece of cheese into his mouth, chewing and swallowing to make sure the residual gray amber scent on his body would mask any other mingled odors. Throughout this process, Lumien sprinted to the edge of the road and halted at an inconspicuous spot. He clenched his jaw tight and spun around, carefully retracing his steps along his previous path. Relying on a hunter's observation skills and dancer's exaggerated flexibility, Lumien made sure to leave only faint footprints and no additional marks. It wasn't long before he reached the center of the road and stopped. Maintaining his invisibility, Lumien remained in plain sight on the road. He waited, using shallow cogitation and constant suspension to suppress any thoughts of attacking the flaming monster, a rudimentary way to disrupt its danger premonition. His inspiration came from a hunter's keen self-awareness. Aurora had once written about the tactic of retracing one's footsteps to lie in ambush mid-road in a novel. After 7 or 8 seconds, the flaming monster's pitch-black form appeared in Lumien's sight. Utilizing his uncanny flexibility, he twisted his body to observe the approaching target. The flaming monster followed the faint footprints and scent left behind by its enemy. Uninterrupted, it continued its pursuit. Once back on the main road, it sniffed the air, unsurprised to detect a mild fragrance. It instinctively lowered its head and found the inconspicuous footprints. But it found no trace of traps in the vicinity. Without hesitation, the flaming monster tracked the footprints to the other side of the road. The charred face and displaced eyeballs loomed larger and clearer in Lumien's sight. Holding his breath, Lumien didn't disrupt his cogitation again, striving to empty his mind. 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter. He lunged at the target, raising the fallen Mercury in his left hand for a swift slash. He didn't wait to close the gap further, fearing that it would trigger the prey's danger sense and prompt evasive maneuvers. The flaming monster suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of danger. Without thinking, it leaped to the side. Simultaneously, its vision captured Lumien's figure, attacking with a pewter-black dirk in his bandaged left hand. They were so close that despite the flaming monster's reaction, evasion was impossible. Lumien collided with it. With a tearing sound, fallen Mercury's sharp blade sank into the flaming monster's right chest. The fate extracted from Noodleman infiltrated the target's body as an illusory mercury bead. Meanwhile, a river of countless intricate mercury symbols briefly surfaced. Some of the destinies rapidly converged towards the pewter-black blade. Lumien didn't bother selecting the destiny to exchange, letting fallen Mercury do as it wished. Boom. The monster's flames erupted. The forceful shockwave hurled Lumien and his fallen Mercury away. Crimson flames ignited his clothes and scorched his facial skin. Lumien bore the searing pain, twisting his waist midair to alter his trajectory. As soon as he landed, he sprang to his feet and fled. However, unable to re-enter the invisibility state until the flames were extinguished, he remained visible. Boom. Despite his serpentine sprint, Lumien was still knocked off his feet by the fireball's aftershock. His back throbbed with numbing pain. He struggled to his feet, scrambling away from the path and into the ruins where he had been hiding before. The flaming monster pursued Lumien, who was unable to turn invisible once more. Chapter 96, 96 Prey and Hunter. 96 Prey and Hunter. The flaming monster pursued relentlessly, hurling crimson fireballs that blasted craters in the earth. Lumien was thrown off balance multiple times. Flames licked at the charred logs that littered the desolate landscape, casting flickering red light in every direction. Lumien barely spared a thought for the fire still consuming his clothes. Gritting his teeth against the searing pain, he was sent sprawling by the shock waves of detonation after detonation. He staggered to his feet and careened wildly towards his destination, veering left, then right, arcing and darting straight ahead. Mercifully, he didn't have far to go based on his plan. Just as he felt the taste of blood in his mouth and his body threatened to give out, a dilapidated building loomed before him. Boom. Lumien contorted his body mid-stride, narrowly avoiding a fireball. The scarlet projectile exploded just ahead, unleashing a hellish maelstrom of flames. Seizing the moment, Lumien dropped to the ground and rolled beneath the worst of the conflagration. With the momentum, he tumbled into the partially collapsed structure. The flaming monster halted and hesitated, wary of pursuing its prey into a potential death trap. It watched as Lumien rolled deeper into the building, summoning a swarm of red fire ravens around it. Their screeches filled the air as they took flight. Half of them dove towards the building's support beams, while the others bore down on Lumien from all sides. These avian flames were unerring, constantly adjusting their trajectories to match Lumien's movements. In that instant, the flaming monster could almost see its enemy's charred remains. Fire ravens were far more difficult to dodge than mere fireballs. And then, Lumien disappeared from the monster's view. He had rolled into a well-preserved basement. Bang! Lumien slammed the wooden door shut and leaped aside, using the force of the impact. Swoosh! 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 The scarlet fire raven slammed into the door. Boom! The heavy door disintegrated into flaming splinters. Rumble! The remaining fire ravens struck their intended targets, bringing down the decaying structure in a torrent of debris. Stone, wood, and dust engulfed the area, entombing the basement. Lumien had already taken refuge in a corner, using the accumulated dirt to smother the flames that clung to him. But he was still badly burned, his internal organs battered by the force of the explosions. Without swift medical attention, he wouldn't last another day. The flaming monster's attack had been devastating, even more potent than Ryan Sands' hurricane of light. Lumien had intended to use invisibility to elude the flaming monster, slipping into the basement to perform his enigmatic sacrificial dance, activating the black thorn symbol on his chest to terrify his foe. He'd planned to bide his time for fallen Mercury to complete the exchange of fate. But the persistent fire had thwarted his invisibility, nearly costing him his life. The one consolation was that he had a backup plan in the event he couldn't escape the monster's pursuit, nor could he perform his sacrificial dance in peace. He'd even considered collapsing the building to bury the basement and buy time, but the flaming monster had done the job for him. Phew! Exhaling deeply, Lumien sat cross-legged. He retrieved the bottle of gray amber perfume from Aurora, unscrewed the cap, and placed it before him. Outside the demolished building, the flaming monster's gaze cut through the swirling dust, searching for any trace of its quarry. It was certain that the cunning intruder wouldn't have been buried alive so easily. Given the complexity of the traps he'd laid and his intimate knowledge of the ruins, he must have left himself an escape route. The flaming monster wasn't particularly intelligent, but its hunter's instincts led it to circle the collapsed building. In less than 10 seconds, it discovered a hidden cave entrance angling downward. The opening was concealed by debris from the fallen structure, sheltered from the ensuing collapse. It was difficult to spot and tucked away in a discreet location. The monster raised its right hand, conjuring a fist-sized white fireball in its palm. With a sudden lunge, it hurled the fireball down the passageway. The flames streaked through the air, penetrated the basement, and collided with the far wall. Boom! The blast wave didn't affect Lumien, who was deliberately hiding in another corner. It only overturned the bottle of gray amber perfume in front of him and quaked the entire basement. The gurgle of liquid flowed from the open bottle, its elegant and sweet fragrance intensifying instantly. Lumien leaned against the wall, eyes closed, lost in cogitation. His mind conjured a crimson sun, holding it steady for a few seconds. Suddenly, a terrifying sound reached Lumien's ears, as if from an infinite distance yet unnervingly close. Blue veins bulged across his face, hands, and neck, quickly turning red. Simultaneously, silver-black spots seeped from his skin. He opened his mouth to scream, but collapsed and curled up before a sound could escape. Fallen Mercury slipped from Lumien's left palm, but it dared not make a move. It didn't even attempt to approach his exposed face or right hand to create a marionette through contact. It just quivered there, violently. Outside the basement, the monster poised to conjure a fireball froze beside the entrance Lumien had excavated. It couldn't help but shudder. A few seconds later, it fled, abandoning the hunt. Lumien plunged into a darkness teeming with flickering flames. His mind was overwhelmed with excruciating pain and malevolent thoughts. In that moment, death seemed preferable. He sensed something deep within him rapidly growing and taking form. It appeared to be a trauma, composed of all negative personalities and a particular will. Once assembled into human shape, it would utterly supplant the original him. Amid the unending darkness of despair and pain, Lumien caught a whiff of a scent. Elegant and sweet. It was Aurora's fragrance, a familiar aroma. Aurora. Grande, sir. Lumien slowly regained his composure, as if hearing the comforting melody once more. I want to live. The loop hasn't ended yet. A rush of thoughts flooded back to him. Lumien finally vanquished the pitch-black will and the agony-laced darkness within his heart and opened his eyes. The first thing in his sight was the toppled bottle of gray amber perfume on the ground. It toppled. Lumien's heart ached as he reached out his right hand. Initially, he'd only intended to mimic Aurora's use of incense to control his symptoms and rely on the natural perfume as a wake-up call. Unexpectedly, more than half the bottle had spilled. In the next instant, his body quivered. He saw the charred, blood-stained back of his hand and the silver-black circular spots that had yet to fade. Without needing a reminder, Lumion could smell the unfamiliar, hair-raising scent on himself. If he crossed paths with Valentine now, he'd be purified by his holy light summoning without revealing a thing. Lumion scooped up the remaining half of the gray amber perfume, tightened the cap, and stowed it away. He then picked up Fallen Mercury, still trembling violently, and asked in Hermes, "Is the fate exchange over?" Fallen Mercury swiftly shook left and right, signaling it wasn't. Lumion exhaled in relief. He feared that by the time he awoke, the fate exchange would have been completed. The shock would last no more than a minute. If he couldn't locate the flaming monster in time, his recent torment would be futile. Breathe in, breathe out. Lumion adjusted his dreadful condition and mustered his remaining strength before crawling out of the basement through the hole he had dug earlier. Each motion tugged at various wounds, making him wince in pain. Upon exiting the basement, Lumion searched for the flaming monster's tracks and sighed inwardly. Using cogitation in such a state and fully activating the thorn symbol on my chest is downright suicidal. I haven't done it since becoming a hunter, barely repressing the symptoms with gray amber scent. Had I done it a few times before, my body might have mutated slightly, turning me into a monster. Can't risk this for a while unless I have a death wish. He opted for cogitation to fully activate the black thorn symbol on his chest rather than the sacrificial dance's partial activation, as time was of the essence and he couldn't perform the dance. With cogitation, he could frighten off the flaming monster in 5 or 6 seconds. The enigmatic sacrificial dance, however, took 30 to 40 seconds, even with his familiarity. In Lumion's hunting strategy, this was his last resort. If he couldn't evade the flaming monster's pursuit by other means, he'd attempt cogitation. Lumion hadn't anticipated that cogitation would leave him gravely injured from the start and on the brink of losing control, turning into a monster. Before long, Lumion discovered the flaming monster's tracks and pursued them. A few minutes later, the prince appeared fresher, so he slowed his pace. Soon after, Fallen Mercury shuddered on its own, notifying Lumion that the fate exchange was complete. Without hesitation, Lumion brandished the iron-black axe and charged forward, following the flaming monster's footprints. In under 20 seconds, he spotted the scorched and smoldering prey. It cowered in a rock-encircled corner, quaking. Lumion dashed over, cast aside Fallen Mercury, and seized the axe with both hands, cleaving down with all his might. With a dull thud, the flaming monster's head and body separated. Bright red blood spurted out violently, igniting into scarlet flame clusters on the ground. Lumion, unable to hold on any longer, collapsed to the ground with his axe. Chapter 97, 97 Courage. 97 Courage. Lumion slumped to the ground, gasping for breath. He could barely muster the strength to move a finger. Silently, he observed the crimson flames flickering on the ground, their intensity gradually diminishing until they snuffed out. During this time, Lumion managed to lean forward and grab the Fallen Mercury with his left hand, while his right hand tightly gripped the iron-black axe, ready for any unexpected threats. His focus was unwavering, and he remained on high alert. Inwardly, he prayed to the eternal blazing sun and the unknown, great being, hoping they would shield him from harm. In his current state, even a mundane foe like the skinless monster could easily take him down, let alone the possibility of the flaming creature reviving itself unexpectedly. As time ticked by, Lumion's spirituality and stamina gradually improved, but his injuries only worsened, leaving him disoriented and unfocused. Hunters need to be cautious, level-headed, and patient, capable of using their environment to their advantage. Above all, they require courage. Courage to confront the unexpected, to persevere in the face of crisis, to steel oneself when escape seems impossible, and to find a path out of the jaws of death. Distracted by these thoughts, Lumion suddenly felt as if the hunter potion coursing through him had been fully absorbed. It was as if a barrier had shattered, and a tiny spark had merged with every fiber of his being. All traces of Lumion's loss of control vanished, and his condition immediately improved. Slowly, he rose to his feet and heaved a quiet sigh. I've actually digested it. This meant he was ready for the next potion. Lumion, clutching the pewter-black dirk in his bandaged left hand, scanned his surroundings. Occasionally, he fixated on the flaming monster's remains, patiently awaiting the appearance of the beyonder characteristics. Unlike the shotgun monster's swift transformation, Lumion waited for half an hour. He wondered if the flaming monster still lived and whether he should strike it a few more times. Finally, on the verge of collapsing from his injuries, red sparks burst forth from the monster's body. Like fireflies, they swarmed around the corpse before gradually coalescing into a scarlet object resembling a heart. The heart pulsed, its surface pocked with countless tiny holes, from which indistinct flames seeped. Is this the main ingredient for the pyromaniac potion? Lumion mused, reaching down to pick it up. A searing pain radiated from his palm straight to his mind, making him instinctively want to fling the heart away to escape the agony. Luckily, Lumion's skin had been numbed by the flaming monster's burns, allowing him to barely tolerate the relatively minor pain. He tried wrapping the heart in a strip of cloth, but it instantly incinerated the fabric, reducing it to ashes. After a moment's thought, Lumion set the Beyonder ingredient on the ground, wrapped the fallen Mercury in the remaining black cloth, and secured it at his waist. Next, he emptied the contents of the cloth bag containing the lead bullets into his pocket. He then filled the bag halfway with soil from the area before tossing in the flame-wreathed heart. But Lumion didn't stop there. He continued shoveling soil into the bag until the heart was entirely encased in layers of inflammable earth. Exhaling, he carried the bag to the edge of the ruins, pondering a newly discovered problem. I'm only a Sequence 9, and this is the main ingredient for the corresponding Sequence 7 pyromaniac. I can't just advance to Sequence 7, can I? This will make me lose control. I initially thought the flaming monster would yield a pyromaniac, provoker, and hunter Beyonder characteristic, but it's all mixed together. Uncertain of what to do, Lumion stumbled away. Miraculously, he didn't encounter a single monster on his way back. In his weakened state, any confrontation would have spelled disaster. His only hope was to rely on his keen observation and sharp senses to detect danger early and avoid it. After an indeterminate amount of time, Lumion exited the dream ruins and traversed the barren wilderness, arriving back at his semi-subterranean two-story dwelling. Laboriously, he climbed to the second floor and removed the fallen Mercury, the cloth bag with the pyromaniac ingredient, and the iron-black axe. He placed them on the bedside table or tossed them to the floor before staggering to the full-length mirror embedded in the wardrobe. In the mirror, Lumion saw his ghostly pale face, marred by flame scars and faint silver-black patches on his skin. His blue eyes flickered with an illusory silvery hue, entwined with darkness. This was a sign that he had sustained severe injuries and nearly lost control. If not for his home field advantage in the dream ruins or the acquisition of fallen Mercury and invisibility, Lumion would have had no chance of defeating the flaming monster. Munching on jerky and cheese to stave off the intense hunger left by his possession, he collapsed onto the bed. He desperately needed to return to reality and rest for a while, allowing his body to recover swiftly. Sunlight pierced through the curtains, casting the bedroom in a soft glow that highlighted Aurora's desk, cluttered with reference materials, reading notebooks, and stacks of manuscripts. It also illuminated a wardrobe filled with dresses and an exquisite full-body mirror. Lumion opened his eyes to meet his sister's light blue gaze. Aurora watched him stir, her voice laced with concern. How was it? Is everything all right? She knew that her brother had ventured into the dream ruins to hunt the flaming monster this time. I succeeded. Lumion sat up, his head feeling foggy. His skin tingled, and his bones threatened to snap. But compared to the excruciating pain that had nearly killed him in the dream, this was nothing. He lowered his gaze to examine his body. Red, swollen patches covered his skin, as if he were suffering from an allergic reaction. That's good, Aurora sighed with relief. An hour ago, you twitched all over and kicked me awake. Lumion laughed, self-deprecating. It was indeed dangerous back then. I almost lost control. I was hesitant to wake you up, but you quickly calmed down and didn't scare me anymore, Aurora said, visibly relieved. Lumion's heart stirred. And you just kept looking at me. That's right. Aurora nodded calmly. If anything happens, I have to shake you awake and bring you back to reality. You can't die in your dreams. Lumion suddenly felt the pain, struggle, and fear of nearly dying in his dream dissipate, replaced by a warm current surging from the depths of his heart. He asked, almost without thinking, you didn't wake up because I kicked you, did you? You haven't slept at all, have you? Aurora smiled and said, that was my original plan, but considering how long you'd have to wait for that monster, and how I just finished my night duty. If I didn't catch up on sleep, I'd definitely be in a daze later. It'd be easy for me to make a mistake and not wake you up in time. So, I decided to put my hand on you and take the chance to catch some shut-eye. This way, I'd be able to sense any movement and wake up quickly. Heh, I was indeed kicked by you. As she spoke, she pointed at her right calf, where a visible bruise had formed. Before Lumion could respond, she asked, "Tell me the details." Suppressing his voice, Lumion recounted his ordeal, describing how he set up the trap, ambushed the monster, and how his clothes caught fire. Unable to turn invisible, he had no choice but to flee into the basement and fully activate the black thorn symbol with cogitation. Aurora listened intently, her expression occasionally betraying her worry for her brother's perilous situation. She was the kind of person who easily immersed herself in stories. As the tale drew to a close, Lumion raised a question. How do I separate Provoker from the pyromaniac Beyonder characteristic? He didn't know where to find the potion formula. Aurora thought for a moment and said, I don't know how to separate them. I've only heard that you might need the help of a high-level Beyonder for such a situation. A demigod. Lumion guessed. There were probably only 3 people he knew who had reached Sequence 4, the enigmatic lady, Madame Pualis, and the one lying in the coffin in the tomb. Aurora nodded. I think so. Actually, you don't have to worry. I suspect the mysterious lady will come to you soon and provide some help. She always appears at critical points in your growth. This time should be no exception. After all, the loop hasn't been resolved and the secret of the dream ruins remains locked away. Go to OL Tavern to find her. Lumion frowned. Their agreement with Ryan and the others was to avoid going out as much as possible. Aurora tersely acknowledged his words. Let's wait a while. She might visit us directly. Aurora sighed and said, for ordinary Beyonders, the potion formula isn't a problem, but you're different. There's corruption sealed in your body, and you can lose control if there's the slightest issue. You still need a complete and correct Provoker potion formula. Why don't ordinary Beyonders need potion formulas? Lumion asked, surprised. Aurora explained, it's not that they don't need them, but anyone below Sequence 7 can advance just by consuming the main ingredient. Doesn't that risk losing control? Lumion asked, astonished. Aurora acknowledged tersely. Years ago, there was a high chance of losing control. But recently, Sequence 9 and Sequence 8 Beyonder characteristics can indeed be consumed directly. However, it's about 20 to 30% more dangerous than concocting a potion. Right, that's the conclusion reached by our president, Gandalf. Why? Just as Lumion was about to ask, a familiar song echoed from outside the house. The siblings exchanged solemn glances. Lent had begun, and the spring elf entourage had reached them. Chapter 98, 98 After the Celebration. 98 After the Celebration. A group of young men encircled Ava, singing and dancing as they arrived outside the Lumion residence. Guillaume Jr. of the Berry family strode to the door and slammed at it. He was a friend of Lumion, Raimund, and Ava. With curly brown hair and prominent freckles, his blue eyes appeared smaller than average, as if perpetually narrowed. With a creak, Aurora appeared before them. Her blonde hair tied up, she wore a formal flounce-lined, light-collared dress. Aurora exuded energy, her face radiant, impossible to tell she hadn't slept well the night before. Ava, donning a laurel crown woven from tree branches and flowers, stepped forward and sang. I'm the elf of spring. With a sweet face and a joyful ring. Come and sing, come and dance. For this is the only way to obtain a harvest that will stay. Aurora listened quietly, took the leaf, and handed Ava a small pottery jar containing animal fat. Bumper harvest. Bumper harvest. The young men cheered. As the spring elf entourage set off for the next location, Guillaume Jr. deliberately lagged behind and asked Aurora, where's Lumion? I haven't seen him in the past 2 days. Is he not participating in the Lent celebration? Aurora laughed and replied, he's sick. Sick? Guillaume Jr. was slightly surprised. He gets sick too. In his mind, Lumion was always brimming with energy. At most, he'd suffer minor injuries from a prank gone awry. I'll be worried if he never gets sick, Aurora replied jokingly. All humans fall sick. Guillaume Jr. hurriedly waved at Aurora as the spring elf entourage moved further away. Tell Lumien I'll visit him after Lent. Aurora nodded slightly, watching Guillaume Jr. sprint towards the entourage that had stopped in front of the next building. How was it? Lumien stuck his head out beside his sister. Aurora thought for a moment and said, they're still normal, but I wonder what will happen at the end of the celebration. Lumien recalled the bloody scene of Ava's beheading at the celebration's end and the strange mood that agitated the young people. They had either gone mad sending off the spring elf or succumbed to mental and physical breakdown, collapsing to the ground. No one was spared. Silently, he glanced at Ava singing in front of the neighbor's house and Guillaume Jr. and company surrounding her. He slowly withdrew his gaze. Ryan, Leah, and Valentine also arrived on the first floor and looked out through the window. We have to be very careful from now on, Ryan said in a deep voice after the spring elf entourage left the area. Aurora nodded and said, yeah. Before the celebration ended, they quickly prepared lunch and filled their stomachs. Clang. 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 The classic wall clock on the first floor chimed, signifying noon. Lumien and the others, having tidied up the dining room, exchanged tense glances. If the Lent celebration had gone smoothly, it would have ended by now. And if the ritual to send the spring elf off was completed, who knew what Corda would become? In their semi-subterranean building, Lumien needed to raise his head slightly to see the situation outside the window. The sky was a brilliant azure, filled with white clouds. The sun shone brightly, and there were no dark clouds, fog, or dim light as he had imagined. Leah paced around the stove, the small silver bells on her veil and boots tinkling non-stop. It was neither intense nor soothing. Seeing Aurora looking at her, she explained, we're already in danger, and it's been an extended period of danger, but it's manageable at the moment. Aurora acknowledged and didn't inquire further. Ryan, on the other hand, sighed and said, by the 12th night, it would be great if it was always at this level. Aurora blinked, embarrassed to tell this Dawn Paladin of the machinery hive mind not to jinx it. Although Lumien's heart was heavy, he still smiled and replied to Ryan. There's a proverb in our Darige region that says, good and bad are all predestined. Regardless of how worried we are, we can't change what happens next. What he didn't say was, the only thing they could do was muster up the courage to face it. In the intermittent conversation that followed, the five of them were on guard against any abnormalities. However, be it the weather or the birds, everything was so normal that it only instilled greater fear in them. After almost 30 minutes, they found themselves staring at the door simultaneously. Footsteps drew near. Soon after, Aurora's doorbell rang, the sound reverberating through the first floor. Exchanging a glance with his sister, Lumien cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. The man who had rung the doorbell was their neighbor, Louis Bedeau. What's going on? Lumien cracked the door open, smiling. Louis Bedeau had black hair and blue eyes. He was in his 40s and had been injured while harvesting wheat in the fields when he was young. He had only 3 fingers on his left hand. Clad in a grayish-blue blazer and dark pants, he said timidly, I need to borrow your oven. It's Lent. We must bake some fresh bread for the kids. As he spoke, he lifted the flour bag and nudged the bag of inferior coal beside him. Lumien hesitated for a moment before turning to Aurora. Aurora nodded, signaling him to let Louis Bedeau in. She had already discussed it with Ryan and the others in hushed tones, intending to observe the changes in the villagers who had participated in the Lent celebration up close. Just baking bread? I thought you'd make some bacon for your kids. Lumien stepped aside and teased Louis Bedeau with a grin. Louis Bedeau replied cautiously, if we have a bumper harvest this year, there should be plenty of bacon. His eyes brimmed with anticipation, as if he was certain of a bountiful harvest. Once inside, Louis Bedeau greeted Aurora and headed to the oven, busying himself. The more Lumien and his companions observed, the stranger they found him. Louis Bedeau didn't even glance at Ryan, Leah, and Valentine, as if they were invisible. It was like a person who had already turned into a monster trying their best to pretend to be normal. However, as long as they encountered something that exceeded their original memories, they would display obvious abnormalities or ignore it. Lumien instantly thought of the deputy padre, Michel Garriga. Initially, he appeared fine, but recently, all that remained were his daily activities of eating, sleeping, and urging others to pray. He ignored everything else. Under the watchful eyes of the three foreigners, Louis Bedeau baked his bread mechanically, occasionally conversing with Lumière and Aurora. It was very normal, yet very abnormal. After Louis Bedeau left with the baked bread, Aurora looked at Ryan and the others, smiling wryly. Everyone who participated in the Lent celebration must have become like this. It's like being replaced by a monster bit by bit, Leah exclaimed sincerely. She no longer forced a smile on her face. Lumière had already regained his composure and posed a question. How can we save someone like this if we want to? The only thing I can think of is purification, Valentine replied with a sigh. But if the abnormality is already closely integrated with humans, the final outcome might be purification together. At that moment, two more villagers passed by the window. One of them was a regular customer of OL Tavern and Pierre Guillaume, who had scrounged Ryan's absinthe in a previous cycle. He was happily chatting with his companion, seemingly discussing the excitement of the Lent celebration. As they passed Lumière's door, they simultaneously turned their heads to look inside the house, their expressions eerily grim. After an instant, they withdrew their gazes and resumed their conversation, smiles plastered on their faces. If Lumière and his companions hadn't been watching the outside whenever someone passed by, they wouldn't have noticed the fleeting change in their expressions. The louder the laughter outside, the more suffocated they felt. Silence took over the conversation. Eventually, the two villagers left, and Aurora sighed, saying, "This isn't just being replaced by monsters bit by bit. I suspect that the entire village is filled with monsters wearing human skin, except for us. Is this the complete Lent celebration?" Lumière couldn't help but mutter to himself. Ryan sternly warned, "It's going to get tougher every day. Everyone, hang in there." From noon to night, they kept vigil against mutated villagers attacking the house, but apart from the occasional passerby who gazed inside with a sullen or cold expression, nothing happened. The situation weighed heavily on Aurora and the others. Ryan surveyed the room and said gently, "There are still a few days until the 12th night. Don't be so tense. After dinner, we'll split into two groups and take turns resting. We must maintain a good mental state." With such an experienced beyonder with a calm demeanor, both Aurora and Lumière felt more at ease. At midnight, Aurora and Lumière woke Leah and the others, then retreated to their bedroom. Lumière glanced at the door and lowered his voice. "That mysterious woman hasn't appeared. Should I find an opportunity to go out tomorrow and take a look at OL Tavern? Everyone in the village might be a monster now. It'll be very dangerous if you go out." Aurora disagreed. She pondered for a moment and said, "Let's wait a little longer. If the mysterious woman doesn't appear tomorrow morning, I'll accompany you to OL Tavern in the afternoon." Lumière hesitated for a moment before nodding. He planned to discuss with his sister tomorrow morning if they should ask Ryan and the others for help. The five of them could act together. In the bedroom filled with a faint gray fog, Lumière opened his eyes. He sat up and checked his body, realizing that his severe injuries had completely healed. Just as he was about to marvel at the fact, he suddenly heard the sound of a doorbell ringing. Someone's ringing the doorbell. The thought instinctively flashed through Lumière's mind. He habitually prepared to go down to the first floor to see who was visiting. He had just taken a step when his entire body froze. This was the dream ruins. How could anyone visit? Chapter 99, 99 Guest. 99 Guest. Instantly, Lumière tensed up. He spun around and returned to the bed, scooping up fallen mercury with his bandaged left hand. Grabbing his shotgun, he strode to the bedroom window while the doorbell continued to ring. He scrutinized the entrance. There was no one there. In that moment, Lumière's heart felt like it was about to seize. He intended to activate his spirit vision for a better look. Since he would hear the maddening and terrifying sound and show signs of losing control after entering cogitation for a few seconds in the dream ruins, he couldn't use this ability smoothly. It took him a while to complete the corresponding operation. However, even with his spirit vision activated, he still didn't notice anyone at the door. Yet, the doorbell rang incessantly. As his thoughts raced, Lumière seriously considered returning to bed, forcing himself to sleep and escape the dream. But he felt that even if he returned to reality, he might not be able to evade the subsequent attack, considering the unknown danger that could invade his semi-subterranean two-story building at any moment. Two scenarios. If the person ringing the doorbell can enter, going to bed is as good as surrendering. If they can't enter, I'll be safe as long as I don't open the door myself. Regardless, I must go downstairs and take a look. Lumion made up his mind quickly. He sheathed fallen mercury at his waist, clipped his axe, and hoisted his shotgun. He stepped out of the room and cautiously descended the stairs. Upon reaching the first floor, a figure came into view. At the 6-person dining table sat the enigmatic woman Lumion had been searching for. She wore a white blouse with a large bow at the collar and loose pearl gray pants. Her casual attire was deceptively elegant. She sipped a pale golden drink, a short black hat beside her. Lumion relaxed and approached the mysterious woman with brown hair and blue eyes. He set the shotgun and axe aside, pulled out a chair opposite the dining table, and sat down. He asked, "You can enter here." The woman set her glass down and smiled. "How else do you think those materials were delivered to your room?" As she spoke, the jingling sound ceased. Lumion glanced at the door, puzzled. "Since you're already inside, why were you still ringing the doorbell?" She smiled and replied, "That's basic courtesy. Courtesy that can scare people to death." Lumion dared only to mutter inwardly. He got straight to the point. "I've obtained the pyromaniac beyonder ingredient." "Ah, it should be pyromaniac." The woman nodded gently. "I know. That's why I came to see you. Are you willing to help me separate the provoker beyonder characteristics and give me the corresponding potion formula?" Lumion suppressed his sudden joy and asked, "I was planning on finding you at OL Tavern." As for the price he would have to pay, he no longer cared. The lady smiled and said, "With Corda's current situation, it's very dangerous for you to go out, so I came here directly. I can indeed provide the help you want, but it won't be free this time." Lumion noticed that indecipherable emotion in the woman's eyes again, but the notion that it was no longer free reassured him. The unknown was even more terrifying. "What is the price I need to pay?" he asked without hesitation. She replied calmly, "The separated pyromaniac and hunter beyonder characteristics belong to me." That simple. Lumion was surprised. He didn't even think of it as a price. After all, he wouldn't be able to use the pyromaniac beyonder characteristics for a long time. She continued, "In addition to the help I originally provided, if there's any more in the future, if there's a future for you, you have to do something for me." Lumion sensed the inscrutable emotion in her eyes intensify. He probed, "What if I don't?" She laughed. "Isn't it common for investments to fail? Didn't your sister lose some money buying stocks with divination? What do you need me to do?" Lumion asked without hesitation. She sighed softly. "Let's talk about it if you can survive." "All right, give me the beyonder characteristic you obtained." Lumion rose and headed for the stairs leading to the second floor. He barely restrained himself from sprinting up the staircase. When she could no longer see him, he dashed. Soon, Lumion returned to the first floor with the cloth bag containing the pyromaniac beyonder characteristic and approached the dining table. The woman raised her glass again and sipped the pale gold liquid. "What's this?" Lumion asked casually. She explained simply, "It's an aperitif from Trier called Black Polka. It's brewed from ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves soaked in sweet wine for a long time. It tastes pretty good." Having raised the topic merely to build rapport, Lumion didn't pry further. He opened the cloth bag and extracted the burning heart from the soil. A scorching sensation seared his palm. Enduring the mild pain, he leaned forward and handed the beyonder characteristic to the woman across the dining table. She extended her left palm and let the heart hover in midair. She glanced at Lumion and chuckled. "When storing beyonder characteristics in the future, remember to change their environment every once in a while. If such a thing comes into contact with something for too long, it's very likely to fuse with it and become a mystical item that needs to be sealed." "Is that so?" Lumion asked, "How often do I need to make a change?" "Normally, it takes 2 to 3 days, the woman said nonchalantly, "but accidents do happen. I recommend switching environments every 24 hours. With proper sealing and preservation, it could last months or even years. Also, if you've already mixed beyonder ingredients into a potion, drink it as soon as possible. Otherwise, the liquid might merge with the bottle." As she spoke, a sudden flash enveloped her body, and the burning heart transformed into countless red fireflies. The fireflies danced and swirled, coalescing into 3 distinct objects. One was a dark red, springy, textured object. Another was a shrunken version of the burning heart, now missing numerous holes. The last was a black stone with a liquid-like surface and a potent odor. The woman's right palm caressed the 3 objects, causing 2 to vanish into thin air. All that remained on the dining table was the dark rock, about half the size of a fist. "Is this the provoker beyonder characteristic?" Lumion asked eagerly. The woman produced a post-it note and a silver fountain pen, scribbling down the potion formula, then reminded him, "You still lack mystical knowledge. After killing the monster, you only took the beyonder characteristic. Such beyonder creatures are rich in spirituality. Many of their parts can be used to make charms, lotions, and ingredients for certain spells and rituals. For example, its blood is a supplementary ingredient for the pyromaniac potion. Although the pyromaniac potion requires fire salamander blood, the monster's blood will do. It's essentially the same, and the effects might even be better." The more Lumion listened, the more regretful he became. Although Aurora's adventure novels included scenes of hunting monsters and harvesting parts, he hadn't connected this to reality. He believed the flaming monster's only value was its beyonder characteristic. And now, retrieving it was impossible, the blood would have dried by now. The woman ignored his reaction, tearing off the top note and letting it float toward Lumion. Lumion grabbed it and read the words eagerly. Provoker potion formula. Main ingredient, 1 provoker beyonder characteristic. Supplementary ingredients, 50 milliliters of distilled liquor, 10 drops of honeysuckle extract, 5 grams of grapevine powder, 10 grams of fern powder. Usage, drink it directly. After finishing, Lumion asked, puzzled, "There aren't any materials rich in spirituality. Like the fire salamander's blood?" She smiled and replied, "Different potions have different requirements. Yours mainly relies on symbolic mysticism. For example, ferns symbolize being easily influenced by others. This aligns with the essence of a provoker. So, a provoker needs to sway others with their words." Lumion tucked the note away, pondering where he might find the supplementary ingredients. Distilled liquor was available at home, Aurora used it in certain dishes. Grapevines and ferns were abundant in Darige, though venturing out might be risky. The only item left was honeysuckle. He'd have to ask Aurora if she had any among her spellcasting supplies. When Lumion looked up again, the woman across from him, along with the black short hat and the black polka aperitif, had disappeared. He hadn't even noticed when she'd left. This despite the fact that his spirit vision hadn't been deactivated the entire time. Phew. Lumion exhaled and headed back to the bedroom, clutching the provoker beyonder characteristic and the potion formula, anticipation swelling within him. He quickly lay down on the bed, intending to return to reality and consult Aurora, hoping to gather the additional ingredients by nightfall. He didn't care that his spirit vision was still active, it would deactivate on its own once he fell asleep. In the dead of night, Lumion opened his eyes and glanced over at Aurora. He couldn't wait to share the news of acquiring the provoker potion formula with his sister. Yet, almost simultaneously, he spotted Aurora's mouth open slightly, a hazy, translucent figure emerging. It was a bizarre, lizard-like creature. Lumion's gaze locked in place. As the ethereal lizard surveyed its surroundings, he instinctively shut his eyes. The lizard darted its gaze around before quickly scurrying away from Aurora's mouth and exiting the room. Lumion reopened his eyes, staring at his sister in bewilderment. Aurora's face was shrouded in darkness. Her mouth hung slightly open as she slumbered peacefully. Lumion observed her, motionless, as if he'd become a statue. In the thick of night, his heart sank further into despair. Chapter 100, 100 Hesitation. 100 Hesitation. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The second hand of the wall clock echoed through the dark room. After what felt like an eternity, Lumion finally shook off his nightmare. He hastily reached over, gripping Aurora's shoulders and shaking her vigorously. "Wake up. Wake up." He stifled his voice, careful not to alert the 3 official investigators on night duty. Aurora's eyes remained tightly shut, her mouth slightly agape. No matter how much Lumion shook her, she didn't respond. She appeared like a living corpse, devoid of a soul. Lumion's shaking gradually slowed, then ceased altogether. He gazed at the sleeping Aurora, frozen in place for a long while. He couldn't comprehend what was happening or when the issue had begun. The fear he felt mirrored the night he'd witnessed his grandfather's death. From that day on, he'd embarked on his nomadic existence. Lumien's fists clenched tighter, his body quivering slightly. Abruptly, he spun around to face the window. The translucent, ghostly lizard had returned to the room. Lumien leaped off the bed, lunging with his right hand to grab the stunned creature as it caught sight of him awakening. In the next instant, he jammed the lizard into his mouth, snarling with a twisted expression, "You like to worm your way into people's mouths, huh? Fine. I'll give you a chance." As he crammed the lizard into his mouth, he tore at it ferociously, his eyes bloodshot. The lizard appeared too petrified to resist. Just then, a voice sounded behind Lumien. "What are you doing?" It was Aurora's voice. Lumien froze and slowly turned to look at the bed. At some point, Aurora had woken up. Her blonde hair disheveled, she sat up with her light blue eyes filled with confusion and bewilderment. Subconsciously, Lumien glanced down and realized that the lizard he had captured had long vanished. For a moment, he didn't know if what he had just seen was a nightmare or reality. "What's wrong?" Aurora frowned. Lumien forced a smile. "You kicked me off the bed while having a nightmare. Is that so?" Aurora eyed her brother suspiciously, feeling like he was playing a prank. She thought for a moment and said, "I had a nightmare. I dreamt that I was grabbed by a huge monster and stuffed into its mouth. I was so frightened that I struggled with all my might and finally woke up." As Lumien listened, a chill ran through his body, as if he had been submerged in an icy lake that hadn't completely thawed. "Maybe, probably, I really kicked you." Aurora was a little embarrassed. Lumien closed his eyes and smiled. "I'm just kidding. I woke up because of something else." He then lowered his voice and said, "That mysterious lady appeared in the dream ruins and helped me separate the provoker beyond her characteristic and gave me the correct potion formula. So, you woke up in joy and wanted to ask me if I had the corresponding supplementary ingredients." Aurora deduced. Lumien said with a smile, "That's right. By the way, do you have honeysuckle extract, grapevine powder, and fern powder?" His smile was much more natural than before, but there seemed to be a flickering glint in his eyes. Aurora mulled it over for a moment before responding, "I have both grapevine and fern. One is a ritual ingredient, and the other is a spell medium. Honeysuckle flowers. We always have them at home. Don't you know that I soak them in water for drinking?" As she spoke, she rummaged through the hidden pocket of her long dress. "That's honeysuckle." Lumien looked at his busy sister and deliberately smiled. "Why didn't you ask if I was given free help this time?" Aurora took out a short grapevine and said with a smile, "You grind it into powder yourself." She didn't seem to hear Lumien's question. "All right." Lumien pretended not to have asked. He then said to his sister, "The provoker potion still requires distilled liquor. I'll head to the cellar to retrieve it and strive to advance to sequence 8 tonight. It will take some time to make extracts from honeysuckle flowers," Aurora said with a frown. "However, the supplementary ingredients for low-sequence Beyonders potions aren't that strict. You can use the entire honeysuckle flower as a substitute. You can consume them as long as the Beyonder characteristics can eventually dissolve." She then looked at the open door and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you afraid that Ryan and the others will be suspicious if you go to get distilled liquor in the middle of the night?" Seeing his sister's reaction, Lumien forced his smile from being too stiff. As a regular at OL Tavern, waking up in the middle of the night and suddenly wanting to drink is very normal. Although alcohol has many disadvantages, it can at least relax my mind to a certain extent. What he meant was to use the excuse that the Lent celebration had ended and he was under too much stress. He had trouble sleeping and needed hard liquor to relax. "Sure." Aurora agreed. Lumien turned around and walked to the door, the smile on his face gradually disappearing. He clenched his fists tightly from beginning to end. After exiting the door and arriving at the corridor, Lumien saw Ryan standing diagonally opposite him in a brown tweed shirt and pale yellow pants. Leah and Valentine were at opposite ends of the corridor. "Not sleeping anymore?" Ryan raised the kerosene lamp and looked at Lumien. Lumien grinned. "I'm heading to the cellar to get some liquor." "How about it?" Do you want a sip to relax? I don't need it. Ryan nodded. You haven't experienced anything like this before. You're tense and under a lot of stress. It's understandable. Alcohol can indeed help. As he spoke, he walked towards the staircase with the flickering kerosene lamp. I'll go with you. You shouldn't move alone at a time like this. All right. Lumien didn't object. As the two entered the stairs, Leah took the initiative to approach Aurora's bedroom and stand guard at the door. 1 step, 2 steps. Lumien and Ryan descended to the shadowy first floor in silence. As the faint light cast a glow over half the stove, Ryan asked casually, "Did something happen upstairs?" "I heard some commotion." Lumien opened his mouth and said with difficulty, "Aurora, something's wrong with Aurora." His intention in suggesting they get alcohol from the cellar wasn't to advance tonight. The 2-story building in the dream ruins also had a cellar and the distilled liquor. His main goal was to avoid Aurora and communicate with Ryan and the others about what had just happened. However, when the words reached his lips, he almost couldn't bring himself to say them. He felt that the unsaid words were even more choking than the strongest liquor. Ryan's expression turned serious. "What's the matter?" Lumien took a few deep breaths before saying, "Aurora, like the deputy padre, had a lizard that looked like a mini-elf coming out of her mouth." It was as if all his strength had been drained when he said this. After 7 to 8 seconds, he recounted the entire incident. Instead of waking up willingly, he explained it as happening to wake up and seeing it. Ryan listened quietly and didn't rush him. After he finished, he said gently, "You handled it well. We can't let her know that something's amiss. I'm worried that it will worsen the situation. Continue pretending that nothing happened. At dawn, I'll use the excuse that Cordu has been corrupted and that we need to undergo a purification every day to prevent ourselves from being affected. I'll get Valentine to try and exorcise the lizard." "All right," Lumien replied weakly. He felt that the lizard had already fused deeply with his sister's soul. It wasn't that easy to exorcise and purify. Ryan glanced at him and patted his shoulder gently. "I can understand how you feel. If something similar happened to my family, I wouldn't be able to stay calm. But you have to remember that impatience can't solve anything. I know Valentine's purification might not be effective, but we have to give it a try to confirm that it won't work. Yes, that abnormality is most likely related to Cordu's loop. As long as we can finally break the loop, your sister should be able to recover." "That's right. This is equivalent to corruption. As long as I can remove all the corruption when the loop is lifted, Aurora will definitely be fine." Lumien's eyes gradually lit up as he regained his motivation. Ryan was rather satisfied with his reaction and said gently, "I need to remind you that you have to adapt to your sister's changes in the next few days. It's very likely that she'll be like the deputy padre, gradually losing herself to instincts. She'll act differently, following her memories and strongest emotions without reacting to anything else." Lumien fell silent for a moment before saying, "I'll adapt." His voice became softer and softer until it trailed off. After getting the distilled liquor from the cellar, the two of them returned to the second floor as if nothing had happened. Upon entering the bedroom, Lumien smiled again. He shook the bottle in his hand at Aurora and whispered, "It worked." Aurora smiled and pointed at the desk. "The honeysuckle, grapevine, and fern are all there." Lumien nodded and placed the bottle on the desk. Then, he lay back on the bed and closed his eyes under the pretext of trying to fall asleep and advance in his dreams as soon as possible. He couldn't fall asleep no matter what. He couldn't figure out when his sister had been corrupted and had the lizard enter her body. During this period, the two of them had been together every second. Even if Aurora went to the washroom, Leah would accompany her, and vice versa. How could there be a problem? If it happened during our sleeping hours, why didn't anything happen to me? Lumien tried his best to recall, hoping to find the source. It would help resolve the abnormality. Suddenly, he remembered something. In the previous cycle, Padre Guillaume Benet had remarked that the church didn't want to kill all the adults here and harvest a ruin. He said that he had other means even if Aurora really wanted to deal with them. At that time, he was still an ordinary person. Lumien initially believed that he was relying on Shepherd Pierre Barry, but with the current situation, he had a guess, a crazy guess. Perhaps from the beginning, most people in the village had been parasitized by those strange lizard-like creatures, including Aurora. As the 12th night approached, the corresponding abnormality would become more and more obvious, and some people would show signs earlier. The reason why he was spared was because he had the bluish-black symbol on him. Recalling Aurora's lack of commitment in many matters in the second half of the previous cycle, Lumière felt that his guess might be correct. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. At this moment, Ryan was patrolling the corridor with a kerosene lamp. On the wall beside him, the shadow suddenly lengthened. Almost at the same time, the small silver bells on Leah's veil and boots rang. She felt her shoulders turn abnormally cold. Chapter 101, 101 Different Powers. 101 Different Powers. The sound of tinkling bells sent a shiver down Leah's spine. Unable to pinpoint the danger, she instinctively used her paper figurine substitutes. Her body rapidly shrank and thinned, morphing into a carefully trimmed paper figurine. The paper figure darkened, turning yellow and brittle as if it had aged a decade in an instant. Silently, the withered yellow paper disintegrated into countless tiny fragments. Leah reappeared at the top of the stairs, clutching the kerosene lamp. But in the next moment, she felt the chill on her shoulders. Her thoughts raced as she raised her right hand and pinched the bridge of her nose. Activating her spirit vision, she glanced at the room across from her and the glass window. In the dim light of the kerosene lamp, the washroom's glass reflected Leah's upper body. Transparent, ghostly infants perched on each of her shoulders. Their faces were round and chubby, their skin a ghastly blue-white. Their expressions twisted in malevolence. The spectral infants leaned down, pressing their mouths to Leah's neck as if feeding on her essence. Rather than panic, Leah breathed a sigh of relief. Identifying the source of the threat was far better than being in the dark. Now she could assess the situation and make informed decisions. Just like this. Leah drew her exquisite silver revolver, aimed at the eerie infant on her left shoulder, and pulled the trigger. Bang! A golden bullet, wreathed in illusory flames, burst from the barrel. The infant wailed as it was flung from Leah's shoulder, consumed by the golden fire. Bang! Leah fired again, this time at the infant above her other shoulder. The second ghostly child, ablaze with the same intense fire, cried out as it followed its companion down the corridor. A woman's figure materialized. Her eyes were a piercing blue, her features delicate, her round face framed by disheveled black hair. She was the Padre's mistress, Sybil Barry, sister to Shepherd Pierre Barry. Her skin was coated in a sickly blue hue, and on both sides of her neck, grotesque growths protruded. The spectral infants returned to her, latching onto the corresponding growths to feed. As they nursed, the golden flames that engulfed them gradually dissipated. But Leah would not stand idly by. She aimed at Sybil Barry and pulled the trigger. With a bang, the golden bullet traversed mere meters before striking Sybil squarely in the forehead. For some reason, Sybil made no attempt to dodge. A bloody hole bore through her skull. Within the wound, white and red mixed as illusory golden flames devoured them both. Clang! Sybil fell lifeless to the floor. The ghostly infants, their pale faces contorted in anguish, vanished. That's it. Leah couldn't believe it. The silver bells on her veil and boots continued to tinkle, growing more intense by the second. In the blink of an eye, Leah felt a cold, malevolent force growing within her. Frantically, she glanced at the washroom and the glass window. Her skin had taken on a bluish hue at some point. In the next instant, her body reverted to a paper figurine. The paper figure crumpled into a ball, hitting the floor with a thud. Leah reappeared in the bathroom, the icy sensation still growing inside her. Almost simultaneously, a gentle voice whispered in her ear. I made a pact with a strange spirit world creature and gained one of its abilities. Whoever kills me, I can be reborn within their body and take control. You're very beautiful. I like it very much. The Padre should like you very much too. Without hesitation, Leah bolted from the bathroom, silver revolver and kerosene lamp in hand. She had to find Valentine. Exorcism was one of the Sun Domain's specialties. They were particularly effective against such threats. Valentine found himself cornered near the balcony. The area was choked by pitch-black, thorn-covered vines hanging from the ceiling. Blood-red, putrid-smelling flowers bloomed all around. Valentine spread his arms, summoning golden flames from thin air to incinerate the monstrous flora. Just then, a figure materialized in midair. He wore a white robe adorned with golden threads. His black hair was short, his blue eyes solemn, and his nose slightly hooked. He was Guillaume Benet, the Padre of Cordoue. No longer invisible, he floated in the air and gazed down at Valentine. In ancient Hermes, he bellowed. Valentine. Dark energy flickered within the Padre's robes. This was an ability Guillaume Benet had obtained through a contract with a spirit world creature. By invoking the target's true name, he could affect their soul body, causing disorientation. The closer the language was to nature and the spirit world, and the better the understanding of the target, the stronger the effect. If his spirit body was far superior to the target's, he could even extract their spirit, leaving them disoriented and defenseless. Valentine's head spun as he heard the Padres shout. He suddenly felt dizzy and couldn't think straight. However, he quickly regained control and shook off the disorientation. Ever since entering Cordoue, he had never revealed his full name. The Padre's ability had limited effect on him. Guillaume Benet hadn't expected success either. Before Valentine could completely shake off the dizziness, the Padre hurled a human bone he had prepared earlier. As the bone hit the ground, the airborne Padre rapidly recited in Hermes, blind, deaf, unwakeable. It was a curse and an ability Guillaume Benet had gained through a contract. He cast bones symbolizing death to render the target like the dead, blind and deaf, with unresponsive eyes. Valentine wasn't asleep, so the curse couldn't render him unconscious. However, the lingering dizziness intensified, blurring his vision and causing his ears to ring. He struggled to see beyond 3 meters or hear anything further away. Seizing the opportunity, the Padre extended his right palm. His blue eyes took on a hazy, almost ethereal quality. Complex mercury symbols, reminiscent of tiny rivers, swirled around Valentine. They formed a grand illusory river shimmering with light. Countless tributaries branched off downstream. As the main river surged forward, most were swallowed up, leaving only one. Guillaume Benet observed for a few seconds and snatched one of the mercury symbols just before Valentine broke free from the cursed blindness and deafness. He intended to amplify the corresponding tributary and make Valentine's fate of being paralyzed by the abyssal demon flowers a reality. Ryan barely managed to dodge the shadow's axe as it slashed down towards him. He quickly discarded the kerosene lamp he had been carrying and donned his silver-white armor. In his hand, a broadsword condensed from light appeared. Clang! 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 Ryan slashed continuously, forcing the shadow back against the wall. The specks of sunrise gleam. He released covered the surroundings, exorcising the shadows in the area. The pitch-black, pale white, evil, or terrifying arms that were about to reach out from behind the shadow were pushed away, making it hard for them to grab Ryan's body. With a clang, the shadow shrank back into the wall and reverted to normal. It disappeared under the illumination of sunrise gleam. Not far away, a remnant shadow enlarged, and Shepherd Pierre Barry, dressed in a long hooded coat, walked out. He bent down slightly and charged at Ryan with his axe, accumulating powers in his body with every step. After a few steps, Pierre Barry seemed to have the posture and strength of a giant. Ryan loomed over his opponent, gripping the Sword of Dawn with both hands as he prepared to strike the enemy charging at him like a rampaging bull. Clang! The broadsword and axe clashed, sending a shower of sparks in every direction. Both Pierre Barry and Ryan recoiled simultaneously. One stumbled back 3 steps to regain balance, while the other only needed 1. Ryan halted his retreat, one leg stretched back, and seized the moment before Pierre Barry could steady himself. He lunged forward, slashing at his adversary. Just then, Pierre Barry's mouth gaped open. His tongue bizarrely morphed into a peculiar chameleon. The chameleon's head was tucked between its legs, a front foot stuffed into its mouth. The instant Ryan's gaze fell upon the chameleon, he was racked by a searing pain in his head, so intense that his attack faltered, failing to land. Headache curse. Shepherd Pierre Barry had gained this ability through a pact with an enigmatic spirit body that had reveled in studying all manner of curses during its life. Capitalizing on the opportunity to inflict a debilitating headache on Ryan, Pierre Barry summoned the receding shadow back and unleashed a ferocious assault. Amid the cacophony of clanging metal, Ryan found himself forced to retreat. Amid the chaos outside, Lumion bolted upright and urgently told Aurora, "Something's not right. We have to regroup with Ryan and the others." Ryan had drilled this principle into their heads time and time again. In the face of an attack, they had to strive to stay together. A united team was far more effective than 5 individuals battling solo. Okay. Aurora leaped out of bed and sprinted for the door, reaching into the concealed pocket of her flowing gown. As Lumien neared the open doorway, he caught sight of a figure. Deputy Padre Michel Garriga stood before him, garbed in a white robe adorned with gold thread. The striking, curly-haired youth's eyes were eerily vacant as he offered Lumien a smile. "Do you want to pray?" With a swift motion, Lumien yanked his axe free and aimed for Michel's neck. Michel's head lolled, but only a trickle of blood escaped. Glancing at Lumien from the corner of his eye, he inquired with a radiant smile, as if nothing had transpired, "Do you want to pray?" As Lumien prepared to raise his axe and sever the man's neck, an overwhelming sense of danger washed over him. Relying on his dancer's uncanny agility, he abruptly spun around and swung the axe behind his back. In the next second, his gaze froze. He saw Aurora. Aurora's light blue eyes had inexplicably grown vacant. She hurled a handful of powder, ground from some kind of tree, at Lumien. Gazing upon his sister's familiar visage, Lumien's axe strike decelerated until it came to a halt. He even forgot to evade. A crackling noise erupted as a sphere of silver lightning struck Lumien's head. He fainted. Darkness swallowed his vision. Chapter 102, 102 Transfer. 102 Transfer. Clang. 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 Ryan retreated, barely managing to parry Shepherd Pierre Barry's relentless onslaught. Pierre Barry's eyes were bloodshot, the gentleness gone, replaced by a ferocious rage. As sinister arms, either pitch black or ghostly white, reached from the shadows to ensnare Ryan, Pierre Barry swung his axe at Ryan's head. This time, Ryan didn't parry or retreat. He didn't even raise the Sword of Dawn. Instead, he twisted his body, allowing the eerie arms to grasp his legs and Pierre Barry's axe to strike his shoulder. Clang. Spiderweb-like cracks spread across the silver pauldron, light flaking off and dissipating. Grimacing in pain, Ryan genuflected, plunging the Sword of Dawn into the floor. He knew he'd been separated from his allies for too long. He needed to regroup at any cost. The strength of a team surpassed that of any individual. In a split second, the light-infused two-handed broadsword detonated. It shattered into countless light fragments, morphing into a hurricane that barreled towards Pierre Barry. Panic flickered in Pierre Barry's eyes at the devastating blow. Ignoring the malevolent arms, he retreated into his own shadow. A fierce storm of pure light engulfed the area, slicing shadows and evil into shreds. As an area of effect attack, Hurricane of Light inevitably impacted Ryan's surroundings, despite his best efforts to direct it towards his enemy. Silently, the walls of Lumien's and Aurora's bedrooms crumbled, reduced to tiny fragments in the terrifying storm. Near the balcony, pitch-black vines hanging from the roof writhed like tortured weeds. Even Padre Guillaume Benet, suspended in midair, had no choice but to hastily dodge. Bloodied scratches marred his body as he fled Aurora's house. Rumble. Half the roof had been obliterated, the second floor pockmarked with gaping holes. In many places, the stove below was visible. Leah was also caught in the storm of light, her figure rapidly withering and shrinking, transforming into a paper figurine. When the tempest subsided, she reappeared in the study, barely intact. Ryan knew she had paper figurine substitutes, allowing him to unleash such a brutal attack on Pierre Barry in a confined space. As for Aurora, Lumien, and Valentine, their positions offered some protection from the attack. Ryan had tried to control the storm's direction, with limited success. After assessing the situation, he decided to use this decisive attack. Crimson moonlight and faint starlight streamed through the ruined roof. Ryan scanned the area but saw no sign of Aurora or Lumien. Leah, pale-faced, was rushing towards him. Valentine lay unconscious on the balcony, numerous wounds from the hurricane of light, but none lethal. Seeing his battered allies, Ryan stopped searching. He grabbed Leah's shoulder and leaped to the balcony. With one hand, the warrior hoisted Valentine and jumped from the Lumien residence. Relying on his not-yet-shattered dawn armor to withstand further ambushes, he raced towards the edge of Corda village, fleeing to the nearest mountain pasture. They had a plan: if they couldn't defend Aurora and Lumien's homes, they'd retreat to the pasture. There, they could use the terrain to their advantage, escape by leaping off the cliff, and trigger the cycle. Padre Guillaume Benet hovered above, unable to match the Dawn Paladin's top speed. Beneath him, Shepherd Pierre Barry emerged from the shadows at the edge of the house. His dark robe was shredded, the hood long gone. His face, chest, and legs bore deep gashes, blood oozing relentlessly. It was a chilling sight. Had he not swapped his shadow with that of a villager at the crucial moment, he'd be dead with his body torn to shreds. The villager who had served as his pawn was now undoubtedly a mangled heap of flesh and blood. As Ryan obliterated the Abyss Demon Flower with his hurricane of light, Valentine's paralysis waned. He regained consciousness before they left Corda village. "What's the situation?" he inquired, his voice muffled by the wind. Ryan, running at full speed, couldn't elaborate. He replied tersely, "Help Leah first." Valentine glanced at Leah, cradled in Ryan's other arm, and noticed her pallid, ashen face. Without a moment's hesitation, he stretched out his hand with great effort and placed his palm on Leah's shoulder. "Son!" he cried out in ancient Hermes. Glistening golden droplets materialized out of nowhere, raining down on Leah. Her expression contorted, and steam rose from her body. Within seconds, Sybil's ethereal figure was expelled, her face filled with shock and terror. She couldn't fathom how she'd been ejected from Leah's body. Immediately after, ghostly golden flames erupted from the void, engulfing the bizarre spirit like a candle, reducing it to liquid droplets. Sybil shrieked and cursed, but couldn't evade her fate of being purified. This time, she failed to reincarnate in Valentine's body. "Vile creature!" Valentine muttered under his breath. Shepherd Pierre Barry looked up at Guillaume Benet, who hovered above, and asked, "Should we chase them?" Despite his injuries, he refused to surrender. Guillaume Benet pondered for a moment and responded, "No need. Our priority lies here. They won't make any moves in the short term. They'll only observe and assess the situation. That's enough for us." As he finished speaking, he furrowed his brow and whispered, "Sybil's dead. Can't she be reborn?" Pierre Barry asked, surprised. He wasn't particularly distraught over his sister's demise. Guillaume Benet couldn't help but curse, "I warned her not to use rebirth in front of the 3 official Beyonders. Rebirth at this level is inherently countered by the power of the sun pathway, but she didn't listen. Imbecile. What a waste of the Lord's gift." Lumien's eyes snapped open, taking in the wispy gray fog and the familiar ceiling above. He had awoken within the dream ruins after losing consciousness. Gasping for breath, Lumien struggled to sit up straight. As Aurora's attack struck him, he had been filled with despair, thinking it was better to just surrender. She could reclaim the beautiful life she had granted him, along with the 5 years she had given him. Phew. Lumien exhaled sharply as 2 realizations pierced his thoughts. That wasn't Aurora. She was possessed by a monster. To give up now would be to abandon her to the creature and snuff out her last hope. Lumien rose to his feet, his resolve stealing within him. He glanced toward the window and spotted a bottle of liquor, a honeysuckle flower, some grapevines, and fern powder. Had that woman sent these materials? Had she witnessed the attack? Why hadn't she? Lumien shook his head, dispelling his intrusive thoughts. In this dire circumstance, he could only rely on himself and his allies. No matter how powerful others may be, they were useless to him now. Wasting no more time, Lumien retrieved the instruments he'd used to brew the hunter potion and poured 50 milliliters of liquor into a beer mug. He added the honeysuckle flower, grapevine powder, and fern powder, one after the other. Lastly, the repulsive stone with its dark, flowing liquid surface. A sizzling sound accompanied the dissolution of the provoker beyonder characteristic, and the honeysuckle flower vanished. The colorless liquor in the mug turned a deep black, becoming viscous. The mere sight of the potion made Lumien want to hurl it away and stomp it into oblivion. He steadied himself, using shallow cogitation to calm his nerves and focus. Moments later, Lumien snatched up the beer mug without hesitation, gulping down the foul, pungent provoker potion. Setting the mug down, he immediately felt his insides grow heavy, as if plummeting. Drawing on his experience, Lumien sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, bracing for the next transformation. His breaths became heated, his emotions veering wildly between anger, sorrow, frustration, and exhilaration. Simultaneously, a voice, infinitely distant yet intimately close, assailed his ears, drilling into his temples like an iron spike. Familiar, searing pain engulfed Lumien's mind, but he couldn't shake certain thoughts. I must succeed. I must unlock the secret of the dream. I must save Aurora. I must shatter the loop in Cordu. Enduring the scorching, tearing sensation and the illusion of losing control, Lumien didn't open his eyes or alter his posture. He felt like a tiny vessel in a tempest, battered by waves and gales. Powerless, but not yet submerged. After what felt like an eternity, the pain began to ebb as the bloodthirsty, insane thoughts receded from Lumien's consciousness. He opened his eyes, knowing he had ascended to a Sequence 8 provoker. Chapter 103, 103 The Padre's Plan. 103 The Padre's Plan. A dense white fog hung heavy in the sky, swallowing most of the light and casting the dream ruins into a perpetual twilight. Lumien stood, stretching his limbs and surveying the blood-streaked mountain peak as he assessed his condition. In comparison to Hunter, the provoker's strength, reflexes, speed, and agility had improved, albeit modestly. Lumien identified three primary changes. First, his body had grown more robust and his recuperative abilities had seemingly improved. Second, his spirituality had increased to a certain extent. He could now maintain his possession state for 4 minutes, up from just 3. Lastly, he had gained a beyonder power called provocation. This ability induced a permanent state change while also requiring active activation to achieve its desired effect. Lumien's observation skills had experienced a qualitative transformation, far surpassing those of an ordinary person. He could now effectively discern which words, actions, and situations would most easily trigger his target's sensitivities and provoke agitation. When provocation was employed, it merged insults and humiliation, causing the target to lose their composure. The more tailored the taunts and humiliation, the more effective the provocation. However, even a single word like dogshit could still incite anger to some degree. Against an uncommunicative opponent, provocation allowed Lumien to exude a repugnant aura. This ability was well suited to the traps and ambushes hunters excelled in, but it held little meaning for Lumien in his present state. He no longer had time for hunting. His sole focus was exploring the wall surrounding the blood-stained peak and uncovering the secret of the dream ruins. In contrast, the enhancements to his spirituality and physical resilience pleased him. At the very least, he could now delve further into the dark area that once lulled him to sleep. With the potion's boost, Lumien massaged his temples. This time, activating his spirit vision was seamless. He finally had the capacity to easily invoke his spirit vision. Without hesitation, Lumien changed his clothes and gathered his gear: fallen mercury, the iron black axe, a cloth bag of cheese and biscuits. He slung his shotgun over his back and exited the 2-story semi-subterranean building. Amidst the muted gray fog, he traversed the wilderness and entered the ruins. He followed a familiar path, avoiding areas where monsters might lurk, and proceeded cautiously. Upon reaching the area where he had encountered the three-faced monster, Lumien danced, partially triggering the black thorn symbol. With the amulet, he navigated increasingly treacherous terrain and repelled several horrifying creatures. At last, he arrived at the thorny wall formed by an array of houses. After a moment's consideration, Lumien chose a direction. He resolved to enter the area that seemed to be shrouded in night, a place that instantly plunged him into a drowsy haze. His intuition suggested that something significant lay beyond the towering wall of twisted trees. However, the area resembling the onset of night held a greater likelihood of harboring the secret of the dream ruins. After all, night, slumber, and dream were often related terms. In due course, Lumien, having performed another ritual dance, found himself in a place noticeably dimmer than its surroundings. He exhaled slowly and stepped forward with determination. Almost immediately, Lumien felt as though he had transitioned from a foggy day to a cloudy evening. Shadows enveloped the objects around him. Clutching fallen mercury, he yawned and pressed on. "I can't sleep. I can't sleep." Lumien urged himself forward. As he proceeded, Lumien remained vigilant, scrutinizing the buildings that formed the city wall. Yet, the secrets of the dream ruins eluded him. Gold coins and other trinkets held no interest for him. Delving deeper, he trudged dozens of meters, his willpower alone keeping his eyes open against the overwhelming drowsiness that engulfed his mind. After a moment's contemplation, he opted for retreat. He would investigate the area behind the wooden wall and enter the sleep-inducing zone from another angle. Perhaps that would grant him access to previously unreachable locations. Lumion pivoted and retraced his steps, but the drowsiness persisted, growing in intensity with each passing moment. At last, his resolve crumbled. His eyes slid shut, and he slumped to the ground. Darkness consumed his vision once more. Lumion was suddenly gripped by a sharp pain in his abdomen, causing him to curl up and open his eyes. First, he saw a dazzling mural with a curved dome, followed by the stern visage of the Padre along with his slightly hooked nose, and Pons Benet's right fist, which he withdrew with a sinister grin. "I've been captured and brought to the cathedral." Lumion recognized the scene overhead and instinctively scanned his surroundings. So Raymond's father, Pierre Greg, Ava's father, Guillaume Lizier, his neighbor Louis Beto, and nearly all the villagers. The altar had transformed beyond recognition, now adorned with lilacs, tulips, and other symbols of that hidden entity instead of sunflowers. The sun's sacred emblem had vanished, replaced by an unnaturally twisted thorn ring, seemingly oozing black liquid. Spotting the familiar symbol, Lumion felt a wave of dizziness as heat surged in his chest. He knew this was a sign that the corruption within him had been stirred but remained trapped within the bluish-black symbol. The Padre and his followers have turned the cathedral into an altar for the hidden entity. Poor Saint Sith. Lumion imagined Valentine would go berserk upon seeing this. Bound tightly, he surveyed his surroundings, relieved to find the stained glass and murals depicting the great eternal blazing sun and Saint Sith's preaching unscathed. It seems the alterations were hastily made. Lumion deduced the cathedral's current state. The villagers stood eerily silent, like wax figures. After observing Lumion for a moment, the Padre scolded Pons Benet. "How could you let him sleep? You should have woken him up as soon as you brought him back to the cathedral." "Understood," Pons Benet replied, his gaze unusually deferential, as if the Padre were his deity or ruler. Leaning against a pillar, Lumion glanced up at Guillaume Benet. "Where's Aurora?" The Padre smiled cryptically. "You'll find out soon enough." "What about the 3 foreigners?" Lumion frantically devised an escape plan while trying to maintain the conversation. Guillaume Benet gazed through the stained glass, his expression relaxed. "They've escaped. They should be at the nearest alpine pasture by now. But don't expect them to rescue you and Aurora tonight. Knowing the officials, they'll stall and merely observe. They'll only act after confirming the situation. Sometimes, they'd rather do nothing than make a mistake. That's how they wasted a decade of mine." Lumion conceded the Padre's point, but he knew that wasn't why Ryan and the others were waiting. Without understanding why the evil god's followers had captured him and Aurora, Ryan's group wouldn't take drastic measures, like triggering the loop's reboot by leaving Cordu. They wanted to wait until the 12th night to uncover the cause of the disturbance here, laying a solid foundation for escaping the predicament in the future. Lumion's silence caused the Padre's grin to widen. In a matter-of-fact tone, he announced, "I plan to complete the ritual tonight." "What?" Lumion was baffled. In high spirits, Guillaume Benet patiently elaborated, "I intend to move the April 9th ritual to tonight. The 3 foreigners won't have a chance to interfere." "What? The 12th night can be moved up?" Lumion was shocked, speechless, and inexplicably terrified. At that moment, Guillaume Benet turned to Pons Benet and instructed, before taking him to the altar, "Ensure he stays awake. You may use any method, just don't kill him." Pons Benet asked eagerly, "What if I kill him? We'll die together." The Padre glared at his dim-witted brother. "Send me to the altar and start the ritual again. Could the bluish-black symbol on me be useful again?" Lumion's nerves steadied as he listened to the Benet brothers' conversation. The Padre redirected his gaze to Lumion and leaned down. "Don't worry, you're not the vessel. We have a better choice." "A better choice?" Lumion's alarm grew as he followed the Padre's gaze to the original altar. Aurora had appeared there at some point in time, dressed in a plain white robe, her golden hair unadorned and her light blue eyes vacant. "Aurora!" Lumion cried out. Aurora remained statue-like, unresponsive. The Padre smiled and nodded. "Yes, your sister is the superior vessel. Your role in the ritual is to help us expedite the timeline. We needn't wait for that exact moment or the shift in the constellations." Lumion was terrified and bewildered. "Why can I help bring forward the 12th night's ritual?" The Padre leaned in once more, a smile of anticipation on his face. Because most of the boons we prayed for are within you. What? How does he know? Lumien's eyes widened, straining to scrutinize Guillaume Benet's face more closely. Guillaume Benet leaned in and whispered into Lumien's ear, "Did you really think you and Pualis were the only ones able to retain memories in the loop?" Chapter 104, 104 Resolute Decision. 104 Resolute Decision. Upon seeing Lumien's blatant shock, Guillaume Benet straightened up with satisfaction and said to Pons Benet, "Keep an eye on him." With that, the Padre strode towards the altar. As he left, the villagers around them seemed to come alive, engaging in animated conversations. The horoscope is about to change. Our good fortune is coming. It won't be long before we're wealthy. When the time comes, I'll drink a bottle of wine every day and eat a pound of meat every meal. I want to find a beautiful woman. I'm going to watch a play. Lumien's mind was a whirlwind, and he barely noticed when Guillaume Benet departed. The Padre's words were like a boulder tossed into a placid lake, sending ripples through Lumien's thoughts. How is that possible? In the previous cycle, I killed him because he didn't understand what made me special. Back then, I didn't even know what was so special about myself. It was natural for him not to know. After that battle, he didn't have any conflicts with me in the subsequent cycles until Aurora began acting strangely, but he didn't seem to know about the loop at all. The cursing he did when I led the rest to catch him in the adulterous act, him being knocked out by Leah after we infiltrated the cathedral, and being spied upon by Aurora using white paper didn't seem fake at all. If he was putting on an act, his level of restraint would be bone-chilling. Moreover, he knows that Madame Pualis retains her memories in the loop and might know something about the abnormalities in the castle. Yet he still had an affair with Madame Pualis at the beginning of each loop, allowing no one to suspect him. If it were me, I wouldn't even have desires after finding out what Madame Pualis had done, let alone sleep with her. The more Lumien pondered, the more he found the Padre terrifying. This fear was unlike the terror he felt from Madame Pualis. Questions swarmed his mind. Why didn't the Padre with his memory sacrifice the 3 sheep from the beginning and obtain the corresponding boon to take full control of Cordu? Why didn't he complete the 12th night ritual on the first day? This could have prevented any accidents. What was he waiting for? The sacrificial ritual only takes place near Lent. Every time does that ritual have a date and time requirement? The Lent celebration is an integral part of the 12th night's ritual. So, the Padre will only have a chance to advance the subsequent ritual after Lent is over. But he could just control everyone from the beginning and wait for Lent to arrive also. Didn't the hidden existence find it odd that they prayed for a boon twice across 3 cycles? Yes, he might have done something, like helping the Padre recover his memories. No, if their sacrificial ritual had truly been completed, the 3 sheep wouldn't have entered the loop again. Their spirits and beyonder characteristics should have gone to the hidden existence. Could it be that, like Raimund, the spirits gathered around the altar and didn't escape the loop? Who were the Padre and the others praying to, and who bestowed their power? As Lumien considered this, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his lower body. He instinctively curled up, but the ropes binding him prevented the motion. Pons Benet pulled his foot back from between Lumien's legs, smirking as beads of cold sweat formed on the young man's forehead. Lumien couldn't even make a sound. He squatted down, raised his right hand, and slapped Lumien. "Did you enjoy that? Tell me, did you enjoy it?" Without waiting for Lumien's response, he swung his arm and slapped the right side of his face, causing his ears to ring. Lumien felt like his head might fly off. Seeing Lumien being beaten by Pons Benet, Raimund's father, Pierre Greg, approached and squatted down. He sighed and said, "Bear with it. Just endure it for a while. Our fortunes are about to change. Good luck is on its way. If you leave now, you'll miss the opportunity." Ignoring Lumien's reaction, he repeated the same words, trying to persuade and console him. Lumien paid no attention to Pierre Greg. He gazed at Pons Benet without anger, as if he were looking at empty air. He completely disregarded him, ignoring the pain and humiliation this villain had inflicted upon him. Only one thought occupied his mind. The situation is dire. Ryan, Leah, and Valentine are unlikely to trigger the loop and restart everything prematurely before confirming the Padre's intentions. Besides, they just fought, who knows when they'll recover. They probably won't sneak back to the village until tomorrow or the day after. This way, no one can stop the Padre from conducting the ritual in advance tonight. Slap, slap, slap. Pons Benet continued slapping Lumien's face and kicking his lower body, intensifying the pain he endured. Lumien's thoughts were repeatedly interrupted by pain as he stubbornly tried to focus, refusing to waste even a second on Pons Benet. This only infuriated Pons Benet further, causing him to strike even harder. My specialness has already been discovered and targeted. They won't give me a chance to disrupt the ritual. What should I do? What can I do? Lumien endured the pain and searched for a way to escape his current predicament. Pons grew tired from beating him up. He stopped and panted. If Ze Padre hadn't forbidden me from killing you, I would have sliced off your flesh piece by piece, including what's down below. Hearing this, Lumien was taken aback as an idea flashed through his mind. Kill me. Kill me. He suddenly raised his head and glared at Pons Benet, his face contorted into a twisted smile born of pain. Is that all you've got? Are you using that pathetic little knife of yours to pick lice for me? He fully embraced his role as a Sequence 8 provoker. In the alpine meadow nearest to Cordu, Ryan, clad in tattered armor, stood guard at the entrance and asked Valentine and Leah, "How do you feel?" "I'm fine," Valentine responded immediately. Leah added, "My spirituality has almost recovered." Ryan nodded and dissolved the dawn armor. "After I rest and recover a bit, we'll return to Cordu." "Now?" Leah sounded surprised. They hadn't been gone from Cordu for long. Ryan exhaled slowly and said, "We need to find out as soon as possible why Guillaume Benet's group attacked us tonight and not on the 12th night. Besides, they captured Lumien and Aurora, but they didn't pursue us. Experience tell me that something's off." Leah nodded slowly. "But we're not in the best shape. After all, they had just fought a massive battle. That's why Guillaume Benet doesn't expect us to return to Cordu tonight," Ryan explained. "Also, we left that item at Lumien and Aurora's house. We have to retrieve it as soon as possible. We can't let Guillaume Benet and the others get their hands on it." Valentine and Leah's expressions turned grave at the mention of that item. They agreed to Ryan's plan. "Pa." Pons Benet slapped Lumien's face again, making his nose throb. 2 streams of bright red blood flowed down to his mouth, bringing with them a foul and salty taste. "How about this?" Pons Benet asked with a smile. Lumien studied his expression and actions, realizing that his words hadn't had the desired effect. He sniffed his blood-filled nose and replied with a smile, "Any other woman could hurt me more than you." "Is that so?" Pons Benet's expression darkened. With a slap, he struck Lumien's mouth, sending 2 of his teeth flying with blood. Relying on Provoker's insight and his experience at pranking, Lumien acutely sensed that Pons Benet's reaction was different this time. Familiar with all sorts of scandals and rumors in Cordu, Lumien vaguely thought of something and grinned. "You don't seem to have a mistress." His mouth was swollen from the slap, and 2 of his teeth were missing. His words came out slightly muffled. Hearing the word mistress, Pons Benet's expression shifted subtly as he kicked Lumien's groin. Lumien nearly blacked out from the pain. He couldn't speak for a few seconds. Forcing a smile, he said with a boisterous laugh, "And the Padre's mistresses are all over the village. Can't get it up." Pons Benet's expression instantly darkened. Lumien knew he had guessed right. He endured the pain, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't dared use provocation earlier, fearing that he would be discovered if he used it too often. Now was the time. Lumien laughed out loud. "Did the Padre sleep with your wife too? Are all your children his?" Pons Benet's eyes turned bloodshot. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Lumien's neck, yelling with all his might, "Why don't you just die?" Lumien heard a cracking sound from his neck and found it difficult to breathe. Yet, he wasn't afraid. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled up as he calmly awaited the excruciating pain and inevitable death. He had done his best to enrage Pons Benet so that he would kill him. Once he died, the loop would be triggered, and everything would restart immediately. Everything would return to the beginning, leaving room for recovery. Not only had Lumien considered provoking Valentine to commit suicide to verify the nature of the loop, but he had also thought of sacrificing his own life in an emergency. Compared to the current situation, what was there to fear? He gazed at Pons Benet, whose expression was vicious, and his purple lips quivered as if to say, "Please, kill me quickly." Chapter 105, 105 That Person. 105 That Person. Pons Benet's grip tightened relentlessly, his eyes bloodshot and bulging. If it hadn't been for the fact that Lumion couldn't speak or that his vision had started to fade to black, he would have thanked him. Suddenly, a hand appeared from nowhere, grasping Pons Benet's hair at the back of his head, trying to forcibly pry him off Lumion. "What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to kill him? Have you lost your damn mind?" Pierre Barry growled in a deep voice as he intervened, stopping Pons Benet. But Pons Benet wouldn't listen. His crimson eyes locked onto Lumion, his mind consumed by fury and murderous intent. All he could think of was killing this bastard. Whack! Pierre Barry swung his right leg up, striking Pons Benet's groin with his brand-new leather shoe. Pons Benet reflexively let go, clutching his crotch, squeezing his thighs together, and collapsing to the ground. He whimpered involuntarily, his face contorted in agony, like a rooster being strangled by the neck. Pierre Barry glanced at him coolly and said, "Once you've recovered, bring Lumion to the altar. The ritual is about to begin." He shifted his gaze, bending down to assess Lumion's condition. As Lumion's senses returned and he slowly opened his eyes, he straightened up and nodded. His darkening vision restored to clarity, the pain in his neck became more apparent. Lumion was disheartened to find that his view was not of the familiar ceiling of his bedroom but of Pierre Barry's bloodied face. "Am I still alive?" He wondered subconsciously as he turned his head and spotted Pons Benet curled up on the ground. "Pathetic." Lumion spat contemptuously. "If you can't satisfy women and can't even kill a man, what's the point of living?" Pons Benet felt a wave of rage surge through his head. If it weren't for the lingering pain in his groin and Pierre Barry's watchful eye, he would have snapped once more. Lumion and Aurora's house lay in ruins, more than half its roof missing. Ryan, Leah, and Valentine crept back under the moon and starlight. Once they confirmed the area was clear, Ryan turned to Leah and said, "Tonight's situation is worse than we thought. Perform divination." As they traveled from Corda village to Lumion's house, they noticed that every house was empty. They had no idea where everyone had gone. This was a shocking anomaly. "All right." Leah nodded. Before she could take out a pen and paper to write a divination statement, Ryan reminded her, "Be cautious. Choose the direction of the divination carefully. Don't attempt it if it feels too risky." "Understood." Leah was well versed in this area. She knew that Corda was a place filled with danger and abnormalities. A minor error in the divination direction could lead to severe injuries or loss of control. After a few moments of contemplation, she entered Aurora's bedroom, which now lacked a wall along the corridor, and found a manuscript to use as a medium. As Leah wrote the divination statement, Ryan and Valentine entered Lumion's room where they had been sleeping. Ryan's brownish-yellow suitcase sat beside the desk near the window, concealed by the curtain. Seeing that the item was still there, Ryan breathed a sigh of relief and said to Valentine, "Make the preparations." As he spoke, he pulled the suitcase out, placed it on the ground, and undid the brass-like metal buckle. Valentine opened his arms slightly, and illusory golden flames emerged from the void, illuminating the room. With sunlight, Ryan finally dared to open his suitcase with a grave expression. Inside, there were no clothes, books, or coins, just a strange, folded scarecrow lying quietly. The scarecrow's eyes were covered with thick black cloth strips. Its face, neck, palms, feet, and calves were made of brownish-green straw, but its arms, chest, and thighs were covered in real, slightly pale white skin. This was a mystical item that the Joint Investigation Team had acquired from the Eternal Blazing Sun Church's Riston Diocese before their departure. Teams at their level could request sealed artifacts to handle abnormalities. Ryan closed his eyes, and information about the mystical item before him naturally surfaced in his mind. Number 217. Name, Tenego Scarecrow. Danger Grade, 2, Dangerous. Use with care and moderation. It can only be applied for operations that require 3 or more people. Security clearance requires a diocesan bishop. Security classification, Bishop, Team Captain, or above. Description: this scarecrow was first discovered in the Tenego region of Riston province, near the remnants of a village annihilated by a cult's worship ritual. 2 purifiers, 10 police officers, and 76 farmers vanished after passing by the farm where the scarecrow was placed, never to be seen again. Research suggests that those who enter a 30-meter radius of the scarecrow and lock eyes with it will lose self-awareness and be drawn towards it uncontrollably. Within moments, they disappear, leaving behind only their possessions and garments. At the zenith of sunlight, the scarecrow loses its power. Touching it or meeting its gaze has no effect. A farmer from a neighboring village claims the scarecrow was once ordinary, indistinguishable from others until the village farmland it protected was decimated. With each disappearance, flesh and skin appear on a small portion of the scarecrow. Its ultimate transformation remains a mystery, but revival seems a likely outcome. The scarecrow already displays signs of life, moving at night and attempting to break free from its containment. Sealing method: blindfold it with a thick, black cloth and enclose it in a confined, dark space. Usage process: remove the scarecrow only under sunlight, and unbind the black cloth from its eyes. Appendix 1. Avoid its gaze at all costs. Even under the protection of sunlight, you risk enduring lasting nightmares and mental debilitation. 2. Limit interaction with the scarecrow to no more than 2 minutes per session. Excessive use intensifies its determination to escape and resist. 3. Warning: permanently seal the scarecrow before it acquires enough flesh. As Ryan and Valentine investigated the sealed artifact's possible loss or escape, Leah entered a dream divination state. Whispering the divination incantation to locate Aurora, she sat at her desk, reclined in her chair, closed her eyes, and quickly drifted into slumber. Guided by her 4 silver bells, Leah glimpsed Aurora, clad in a simple white robe, in a surreal, distorted world. She recognized an altar, nearby villagers, and the distant stained glass and golden walls of a cathedral. Leah's eyes flew open, and she bolted from the room. Breathlessly, she informed Ryan and Valentine, they're all at the cathedral. Performing a ritual. Inside the Cathedral of the Eternal Blazing Sunday. Pons Benet carried the disappointed Lumion toward the altar adorned with lilacs and tulips. Pierre Barry, keeping a watchful eye, accompanied them. Glancing at his sister Aurora, her eyes vacant, Lumion turned to Pierre Barry and sneered. You're nothing but a coward and a piece of trash. The shepherd shot him a glance but remained silent, his expression unchanging. Undeterred, Lumion continued, grinning, your woman died of illness, yet you did nothing. You just put your faith in a malevolent god. Didn't she die because the factory owner overworked her and paid her next to nothing? If I were you, I'd have hunted down that boss and hung his whole family from the factory chimney. But you didn't. You were too scared. Scared you'd die too. Trash, coward. As Lumion studied Pierre Barry's subtle reactions, he slyly added provocation to his final words. Pierre Barry's expression contorted, his gentle gaze slowly morphed into a menacing glare, as if a hidden seal had been broken, unleashing the demon within. Padre Guillaume Benet, at the altar, barked sternly, control yourself. Pierre Barry shuddered and came to his senses. In retaliation, he ripped a piece of cloth from his ragged attire, crumpled it into a ball, and shoved it into Lumion's mouth. F***ck. Lumion struggled fiercely, but to no avail. He kept cursing and adding provocation, but time was against him. His mouth was fully gagged by the cloth, and he could no longer speak. Panic and despair welled up in Lumion's heart, threatening to overwhelm him. He desperately reined in his emotions, warding off any thoughts of surrender. Carried to the altar, Lumion's mind raced, searching for alternative ways to end his life. Soon, he was presented before the Padre, the massive black thorn symbol separating him from Aurora. Guillaume Benet motioned for Pierre Barry to help Lumion to his feet, then scrutinized the young man's face and smiled. You're tougher than I thought, but you're still lacking. The world is so hard, a man must have 2 fathers to look after him, yet you have none. No one to teach you the ways of life. The world is so hard, a man must have 2 fathers to look after him, was a popular saying in Intis. It referred to both a biological father and a societal father, often known as a godfather. This was why the people of Intis often acknowledged godfathers and godmothers. The Padre taunted Lumion for being an orphan, with neither a godfather nor a father. In response, Lumion wished he could retort, mocking the Padre about his own child having 3, no, 4 fathers, the Padre himself, his godfather, his mother's lover. If the gag hadn't held tight, Lumion would definitely have taunted the Padre enough to make him lose his mind, killing him on the spot. Unfortunately, he couldn't say anything. Should we begin the ritual now? Pierre Barry inquired of Guillaume Benet. The padre shook his head. Let's wait a bit longer. What for? Pierre Barry asked, puzzled. The padre offered no answer, but Lumien was already devising a new suicide plan. Suddenly, inspiration struck. Enter a deep cogitation state and submit to the scrutiny of the two entities. Eagerly, he sought the enigmatic and horrifying voice, hoping to provoke his own breakdown and loss of control. Lumien glanced at Aurora, her face blank and her eyes empty, but otherwise unchanged. He closed his eyes. First, he envisioned the crimson sun. Once calm, he transformed it into the orb adorned with eyes and a cross. Silently, Lumien saw the faint gray fog once more. He saw the chaos of overlapping colors and indescribable, non-existent things. Yet this time, he didn't sense the gaze of an entity lurking within the fog or looming high above. Why is it different? Lumien's eyes snapped open in surprise. Just then, a figure entered through the cathedral doors. Clad in a black robe and a wide hood, the man's face was obscured by shadows. He stood tall, around 1.8 meters in height. As the mysterious figure approached the altar, the padre stepped aside deferentially, his demeanor humble and reverent. Who is that? The one behind the padre. Lumien puzzled, peering closer. The more he studied the men, the more familiar he seemed, as though Lumien had encountered him before. Suddenly, it clicked. This was the figure lurking in the corner of the warlock's tomb. The black-robed man ascended the altar and stood before Lumien. Leaning forward slightly, he stifled a chuckle. Did you realize that cogitation is useless? What? How does he know? Lumien stared at him, shocked and bewildered. At this proximity, even with the hood concealing his features, Lumien could discern the black-robed man's face. He was a young man in his late teens, his limbs long and lean, his hair short and jet black, his eyes a light blue, and his features sharply chiseled. He was strikingly handsome. What? Lumien's gaze locked onto the man. He knew this face all too well. He saw it every day when he looked in the mirror. It was himself. Chapter 106, 106 The Ritual Begins. 106 The Ritual Begins. Lumien noticed that the black-robed man's face was nearly identical to his own, save for a few subtle differences. The depths of the stranger's light blue eyes held a faint silver-black hue. It was unclear whether the shadow of the hood affected the man's complexion or if his skin was naturally a shade darker. Who are you? Lumien blurted out in shock, his words muffled by the cloth in his mouth, leaving only indistinct movements. The black-robed man smiled without introducing himself, turning and walking towards the padre. Lumien strained to follow, desperate to learn the man's identity, his purpose, and why he had appeared in the dead warlock's tomb. This was crucial to him. Although the padre's ability to retain memories within the loop was surprising, it wasn't inexplicable. Lumien's theories about the nature of the loop could account for such an anomaly. After all, Madame Pualis was a prime example. However, the black-robed man's sudden appearance was entirely unexpected. It wasn't his presence that was startling. Lumien had always suspected another individual, apart from the owl and the occupant of the coffin, to be the mastermind behind Corda's abnormalities. What truly shocked him was the striking resemblance between the black-robed man and himself. It suggested the man could be another version of Lumien. His theories about the loop's nature failed to explain this baffling revelation. Something's not right. Lumien struggled to lean forward, but the ropes held him fast, causing him to crash onto the altar with a thud. His nose, which had ceased bleeding, began to flow anew, and the red, swollen wounds grew more prominent. Undeterred, Lumien pressed on. Unable to use his limbs, he relied on Dancer's incredible flexibility, slithering towards the black-robed man with great difficulty. His mind raced with thoughts. I have to find out who this black-robed man is and why he's here. This must be a manifestation of the loop's essence. Unraveling this secret could provide hope of using the loop to escape the current predicament and ultimately resolve the anomalies plaguing Cordu. Drip, drip. Blood from Lumien's face stained the ground a vibrant red. His body smeared the crimson hue in all directions as he writhed in his struggle. The scene was chaotic and reeked of blood. He strained to reach the black-robed man, but couldn't utter a sound. His face, contorted by pain and anxiety, was a horrifying sight. The black-robed man, bearing an uncanny resemblance to Lumien, glanced down and instructed the Padre, Guillaume Benet, begin the ritual. All right, Guillaume Benet told Pierre Barry at the edge of the altar. Bring Lumien to the altar. Pierre Barry strode over, gripped Lumien under his arm, and hoisted him up. No. Lumien thrashed with all his might, like a fish freshly yanked from the water. Pierre Barry nearly lost his grip due to Lumien's slipperiness. The gentleness in Pierre's eyes quickly vanished, replaced by a ferocious and brutal glint. His strength surged as he forcefully restrained Lumien and flung him onto the altar. Afterward, Pierre Barry glanced at Lumien and chuckled. You better hope you die during the ritual rather than live through it. You'll regret it, I promise. Is this a response to my earlier provocation? Just as this thought crossed Lumien's mind, he saw Aurora, clad in a simple white robe, approach his side. She leaned against the altar adorned with lilacs and tulips, her gaze vacant as she stared at her brother. The cathedral's villagers swarmed forward, forming a semicircle around the altar. The Padre retrieved 2 grayish-white candles, positioning them at the corresponding locations of Aurora and Lumien. Next, he placed a candle beneath his feet, creating a pattern on the altar with 2 candles above and 1 below. After a few moments, the Padre ignited the 3 candles in sequence, from top to bottom and left to right, using his spirituality. A faint sweetness wafted into Lumien's nostrils, leaving him disoriented. The scene felt inexplicably familiar. Ryan, Leah, and Valentine stealthily approached the side of the Eternal Blazing Sun Cathedral, clutching a brownish-yellow suitcase. Hidden in the shadows, they peered through the stained glass to see the Eternal Blazing Sun's altar transformed. They spotted Lumien bound on the left and Aurora standing on the right. They saw the Padre facing the siblings, a lit grayish-white candle beneath his feet, flanked by the enigmatic black-robed men and Pierre Barry. Valentine's fists clenched as a golden light flickered in his eyes. Leah cast a sidelong glance at him, concerned her companion might be consumed by rage. Fortunately, Valentine was a seasoned purifier who had completed numerous missions. He understood what needed to be done and what to avoid. Ryan averted his gaze and lowered his voice. We'll move closer to the altar, shatter the glass, and launch a surprise attack. Our goal is to grab Lumien and Aurora and be out of the village within a minute. If we don't achieve our objective in that time, abort the mission and flee to the river. Trigger the loop proactively. All right, Valentine and Leah murmured in hushed tones, each nodding in agreement. Ryan added, Valentine, ready sunlight. We can't hold back any longer. We have to deploy 2 to 217 now. No problem, Valentine responded as Leah retrieved a box of matches. She manipulated the silver bell on her veil and boots, sprinting around Cordus Square at breakneck speed while tossing matches at various points. This marked a predetermined escape route. Magicians didn't perform unprepared. Once Leah had completed her task, the trio of official investigators cautiously circled beneath the stained glass to the side of the altar. Valentine peered inside and told Ryan, the ritual is about to commence. We must act now. Ryan, also observing the cathedral's interior, furrowed his brow and asked, did you notice anything off? Leah hastily replayed the scene she had just witnessed in her mind, replying with apprehension, I can't hear anything from inside. They were a mere 3 meters from the closest villagers, yet they couldn't discern any sound emanating from within. The villagers were clearly engaged in animated conversation. Ryan's eyes narrowed, and a suspicion instantly took shape in his mind. He stood up and rammed into the stained glass window before him, disregarding that the cultists inside the cathedral might discover his presence. Clangs echoed as the delicate glass remained unbroken, but the villagers within the cathedral seemed oblivious to the chaos outside. As Ryan summoned the dawn armor and sword of dawn, Leah sprinted in circles outside the window. This time, not a single deliberately uncontrolled silver bell jingled. From Leah's perspective, this implied there was no danger, yet, how could there be no threat emanating from the cathedral? Thus, she concluded that the correct answer was, the situation was extremely dangerous. It was so dangerous that the silver bell-sealed artifacts were utterly disrupted or dared not react. Bang! The sword of dawn, forged from light, struck a pane of stained glass but failed to have any impact. It seemed as if the entire cathedral was shrouded by an invisible, terrifying force that barred outsiders from entry. A brilliant pillar of light, encircled by flames, descended from the sky as Valentine spread his arms. However, it didn't appear inside the cathedral as he had anticipated. Instead, it landed outside the stained glass, causing ripples. It appeared that the interior and exterior were entirely isolated. Ryan made a quick decision and said to Valentine and Leah, "Let's try the sealed artifact. If it doesn't work, we'll leave the village to trigger the loop." Ryan didn't suggest immediate retreat because he hoped to barge in and save Lumiere and Aurora. He suspected that once the ritual truly began, the loop might be affected. In that case, they wouldn't be able to leave Cordu or restart everything there. Wasting no time, Valentine summoned the illusory golden flames. With 2 pops, Ryan opened the suitcase and retrieved the Tenego scarecrow, its skin already half covered. He pressed the scarecrow's front against the stained glass and untied the thick black cloth. A pair of human-like eyes appeared on 2-217's face, devoid of emotion and embedded within the brownish-green straw. The eyes swiveled and locked onto Pons Benet, standing at the edge of the altar. The villain froze, then bolted toward the window. As he ran, his body vanished, leaving his clothes to flutter to the ground and cover his leather shoes. A piece of skin-covered flesh emerged on the Tenego scarecrow's neck, fusing with the stalk below. "It works!" Ryan and the others exclaimed, elated. This meant that breaking into the cathedral wasn't impossible, and the altar's protection was not impregnable. The horoscope is about to change. It's finally happening. Amidst the villagers' uproar and the surrounding scent of grey amber, cloves, musk, and tulips, Lumiere experienced an uncanny sense of déjà vu. Relying on Dancer's flexibility, he forced his upper body up despite being bound. The next second, he saw the Padre open his mouth and shout in ancient Hermes, the mighty circle of inevitability. As soon as the words left his lips, darkness enveloped the cathedral's interior, and the villagers fell silent. The orange flames on the 3 candles were reduced to the size of pepper granules, now tainted silver and black. Lumiere's mind buzzed as the familiar burning sensation ignited in his chest. His vision blurred, and the vacant-eyed Aurora, the solemn-looking Padre, and the hooded black-robed man appeared before him in layers beneath the dazzling gold dome. A sharp pain stabbed at his head, as if something was being yanked from the depths of his memory. It felt eerily similar to the scene unfolding before him. The sense of familiarity and déjà vu surged within Lumiere's heart, dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than before. Thump, thump. He could hear his heart pounding. Chapter 107, 107 Shattering. 107 Shattering. Thump, thump. Lumiere felt his heartbeat pounding, as images were painstakingly dragged from the depths of his memories. His head threatened to split open. He fought against it, unwilling to continue. Outside the stained glass, Ryan observed the ritual beginning. He tossed the Tenego scarecrow to Leah without hesitation, signaling her to use the sealed artifact against the Padre. He hefted the Sword of Dawn. Beneath the golden flames, Leah and Valentine moved to another stained glass window, a half-exposed cylindrical wall separating them from Ryan. They did this to evade the damage from the hurricane of light without hindering their movements. With the cathedral's defensive capability, they believed a barrier between them would suffice. After all, Ryan would do his best to control the attack's direction. Leah embraced the Tenego scarecrow from behind, pressing it against the stained glass depicting Saint Sith's sermon. She aimed at the altar and Guillaume Benet, the Padre leading the ritual. On the other side, Ryan gripped the handle with both hands, plunging the Sword of Dawn into the windowsill. The two-handed broadsword, forged from pure light, shattered and transformed into a whirlwind of razor-sharp fragments and specks of light. The hurricane exploded and slammed into the stained glass before him. With a cracking sound, the entire cathedral trembled. Hairline fractures spiderwebbed across the glass surface. But it held fast. Seeing this, Ryan summoned the minuscule particles of sunrise gleam, forging a massive two-handed axe. Unable to use Hurricane of Light for now, he switched weapons. Leah and Valentine, shielded by the protruding wall, dodged the Hurricane of Light's remnants. At that moment, the Tenego scarecrow's gaze locked onto the priest. Its eyes, set in the brownish-green straw, reflected the white-robed figure with golden threads. Leah noticed a faint silver light tinged with black materialize around the altar where Guillaume Benet stood. With a snap, the Tenego scarecrow's eyes burst open, weeping blood-red tears. The Padre glanced over before looking away. As two sheep willingly entered the altar, he intoned the incantation with calm fanaticism. You are the eternal cycle, the predestined destiny, the cause, the effect, and the process. Suddenly, the two deity-representing candles on the altar elongated to the size of a human head. A howling wind swept through the cathedral, turning the villagers to statues. But silver-black warts emerged from their exposed faces and hands. The silver-black light enveloping the altar rapidly spread, engulfing the entire cathedral. The mural-filled dome became transparent. Clouds dispersed, and the crimson moon darkened to the shade of blood. The stars on the black velvet backdrop flickered into existence, one by one, glowing with the intensity of the sun. In an instant, night became day. The villagers stirred and murmured dreamily. The horoscope has changed. Fortune is here. With 3 thuds, Ryan, Leah, and Valentine, who hadn't heard but had witnessed the scene, crumpled to the ground. They writhed, wailed, and screamed in agony. Ryan's skin turned grayish-blue, Leah's face appeared to teem with maggots and pulsing tendrils, and Valentine radiated a sun-like glow, from inside to out, from top to bottom. They were on the brink of losing control. The Tenego scarecrow lay cast aside, trembling violently. Lumien felt his chest burn as the terrifying voice, seemingly originating from an infinite distance and yet right beside him, echoed in his ears. Invisible steel drills penetrated his skull, stirring his brain. Blood vessels bulged in pain, and silvery black spots emerged beneath his skin. An unseen force enveloped him, lifting him from the altar. The ropes binding him and the cloth gagging him crumbled to dust and dispersed in the air. Aurora, too, was hoisted by this invisible force, floating above the altar and facing Lumien. His bloodshot eyes mirrored his sister's long blonde hair, vacant light blue eyes, pristine and emotionless face, and the simple yet odd white robe she wore. He recoiled, sensing a familiar déjà vu from the depths of his memories. The pain was as intense as the madness. The surrounding scenes melded together in Lumien's mind. The Padre's solemn and fanatical expression. The black-robed men advancing toward the altar. Pierre Barry prostrate on the ground. The transparent cathedral dome. The crimson moon and constellations in the sky. The villagers with stiff expressions, welcoming their fortune. Aurora, her face contorted with pain. Lumien's head spun as his body was torn apart by an invisible force, silver-black spots multiplying on his skin. He was powerless to break free or resist effectively. Ah! Lumien screamed involuntarily as his chest was gradually pried open, casting a silvery black light onto Aurora. Aurora's eyes darted around, hearing the agonized cry. Her empty gaze mirrored Lumien's swollen blood vessels, his twisted face with silver-black hues beneath the surface. After a momentary pause, she instinctively reached out and pushed Lumien away from danger. Grande sir. Lumien stared, dumbfounded, as Aurora shoved him out of the altar's reach. Suddenly, the dreadful sound in his ears vanished, and the invisible restraints on his body disappeared. The burning sensation across his skin subsided. Yet the pain in his head remained unchanged. Deep-rooted memories were forcibly dredged up. It was as if someone had used a hook to slowly extract his brain from his skull. Aurora's light blue eyes tainted with silver-black, her blank stare, her lifeless face, and her resolute, forceful actions pushing him away flashed in Lumien's mind. It was nearly identical to what he'd witnessed moments ago, but the black-robed man was missing from the background. This amplified déjà vu led Lumien to instinctively question if something similar had happened before. He screamed in pain once more. Bam! He plummeted to the ground after leaving the altar. Ignoring the excruciating pain in his head and his disorientation, Lumien sprang up, prepared to seize Aurora and flee the altar with his sister. A figure obstructed his path. The black-robed man wearing his face struck him on the right cheek, sending him sprawling to the ground. Lumien refused to give in. With desperate courage, he rose again and lunged at the black-robed man blocking his way. Whack! The black-robed man swung his fist, and Lumien instinctively evaded. He stood stunned for a moment before. A twisted smile crept across his face. He snarled, "Why are you so damn weak?" "As weak as me." Lumien dismissed thoughts of the Padre and Pierre Barry as he lunged at the black-robed man. The man sidestepped, raising his right foot to trip Lumien's calf. Lumien didn't evade. With the terrifying flexibility of a dancer, he forced a half-turn and extended his arm to grapple his foe. Thud. He tumbled to the ground, taking the black-robed man down with him. The man nimbly raised his right hand, gripping Lumien's throat and delivering a brutal knee to his groin. Lumien didn't flinch. Bloodshot eyes locked on his opponent, he clawed at the man's eyes with his right hand. Ah! The black-robed man screamed as Lumien tore out his eyeballs, blood spurting forth. Lumien instinctively curled up, nearly passing out from the agony in his lower body. Struggling to his feet, he shot the writhing man on the ground a sinister grin. Come on. Let's die together. You coward. Coward. He lunged once more, encircling the man's neck with his arms. At that moment, Pierre Barry, at the edge of the altar, staggered to his feet. Brandishing his axe, he sprinted to Lumien's side. Whack! His axe descended, only to be halted by a faint gray mist that had materialized. It failed to harm Lumien. Pierre Barry employed two different abilities, but couldn't penetrate the gray fog's defense. Guillaume Benet, the priest, didn't hesitate and began reciting a prayer. I implore you. I beseech your benediction. I plead with you to grant me. Before he could finish, the scene transformed. The constellations in the sky shifted incrementally, deviating from their original positions. Corda trembled violently as every house and inch of soil surged toward the cathedral. Silently, the villagers decomposed into organs. Eyeballs, mouths, noses, hearts, fingers, and flesh a scant few reassembled into different people. Some appeared normal, others malformed, some missing parts, and some with extra appendages. The majority hurtled toward the altar and Aurora. Cracks spread across Aurora's body, and she swiftly disintegrated into countless pieces of flesh. Witnessing this, Lumien spiraled into despair. Still, he refused to surrender. Seizing the black-robed man's head, he twisted it violently, snapping his neck under the man's horrified gaze. Lumien rose and raced toward his sister. But an invisible barrier surrounding Aurora obstructed his path. Rumble. With a muffled thud, the cathedral began to ascend. Trees, soil, and boulders from outside the village soared, accompanied by houses, furniture, and miscellaneous items. The organs of most villagers merged with Aurora's flesh at the altar, contorting and writhing before morphing into a colossal being. The giant stood 4 to 5 meters tall, boasting 3 heads and 6 arms. Its entire form was composed of flesh and organ fragments, its body riddled with cracks oozing yellow pus. The central head of the giant, filled with pain and regret, strained to gaze at Lumien. Transparent, blood-hued tears trickled from the corners of his eyes. Witnessing this, Lumien's mind reeled as if cleaved by an axe. His vision wavered as he saw the shattered cathedral, the steadily rising blood-red peak, the thorny city wall formed by distorted houses, the encircling ruins around the peak, and the various monsters forced to flee the area. Lumien's head throbbed with pain again. As he watched countless tiny beams of light shoot from the giant and surrounding monsters, landing on his chest, he realized that the scenes buried deep in his memories had been entirely unearthed. They were nearly identical to what he saw now. This is... Lumien abruptly had a hunch, and his headache worsened. Suddenly, everything before him turned eerily illusory, with pronounced cracks appearing like broken glass. This is... Lumien finally recalled something. Then, he saw the black-robed man transform into a pitch-black, repulsive liquid that soared before him and seeped into his left chest. Ah! Lumien screamed in agony as his surroundings crumbled. He snapped his eyes open and found himself lying beneath the blood-red mountain peak. The encroaching darkness, signaling the onset of night, had nearly vanished. Lumien instinctively sat up, leaning forward. He placed his hands on the ground and scanned his surroundings. He saw a twisted, thorny wall, a barren landscape devoid of vegetation, and the dream ruins beyond. He spotted Ryan, Leah, and Valentine lying at the edge of a room not far away. They were sound asleep. Lumien abruptly bowed his head, raised his hands, grasped his hair, and whispered in anguish, "Is reality a dream, and the dream reality? Is this the present or the past? Aurora. Is Aurora beyond saving?" "Yes." A woman's voice echoed in the ruins. Lumien looked up, bewildered, and faintly saw the enigmatic woman appear before him. She approached, wearing the orange dress she'd donned at the beginning. That's why you were so desperate to obtain superpowers in your dream, regardless of the consequences. That's why you disregarded others' lives and even your own. You wanted to resolve the loop, embodying the concept of a problem as quickly as possible. That's why you couldn't control your instincts and uttered inappropriate words or performed inappropriate actions on certain occasions. Lumian gazed at the mysterious woman, dazed, realizing that the indescribable and inexplicable emotion in her eyes had resurfaced. This time, he could finally decipher it. It was pity.